Good evening and welcome to our fourth meeting of fiscal year 2022. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, the Milton Planning Board shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided via Milton Access Television. That's miltonaccesstv.org. And also real-time public comment can be addressed to the planning board utilizing Zoom, and our meeting ID and passcode are available on our agendas, which can be found on the planning board website. So we could go around and introduce ourselves. Meredith, would you like to go first?
Meredith Hall, member.
Cheryl?
Carol Tagayas, member.
Kathleen O'Donnell, member.
And our staff?
Tim Zerwinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
Julia?
Julia Getman, clerk.
And Allison won't be joining us tonight. She had an accident, and I think she fractured her toe. So she, yeah, she's fine. Well, I think she's fine. I just wanted to give her an opportunity if she was on any painkillers or anything to not have to worry about being at the meeting. So
okay.
She's doing all right. I gave her the night off.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear about her toe. I hope it recovers in good speed. And Denny Swenson, chair of the planning board. Okay, all right, so let's talk about our next meetings. Tim has been kind enough to inform me that the Milton Board of Health has advised this Board of Selectmen that we should have masks on within the town hall. So any visitors to the town hall, or if the planning board were to hold meetings at the town hall, we would have to wear masks. So it seems as though there's some encouragement for us to, think about the health and welfare of not only us, but the citizens who come to our meetings. But I wanted to open it up to the rest of the board to see what they think. This is kind of until further notice, so that could be lifted at any time. But it would seem that maybe we would think about having virtual meetings for September, and reassessing at the end of September, or say we would reassess when they change their policy or what have you. So it would help our town planning staff if they had a good sense of where we were going. So they don't have to ask every month, but they've been really great about rolling with it. So I guess I'll just open this up to hear other people's thoughts on this. So Meredith, did you have any thoughts? Or
I'm so disappointed because it was so nice to be back in person, but I feel like, if we all have to wear masks and the attendees have to wear masks, that staying virtual, I'm good with that, if that's.
Yeah, thank you. I was absolutely flummoxed and I was so disappointed because I really, really liked getting together and seeing your smiling faces. And I just thought we really worked so well as a team when we're at the same table. And, but we're in a pandemic and it's just been crazy. So any thoughts, Kathleen or Cheryl?
I think it makes sense for September to do virtual because, like even the governor has a policy for this children or the schools to have masks on through September and then evaluate. So I will say I was at a meeting at Town Hall where following the meeting was notified that a person in attendance at that meeting later tested positive for COVID and that person had been vaccinated. And so, and I had been planning to travel to visit a family member with an illness. And so that kind of just throws, things into a bit of uncertainty, I guess. And so I'm feeling as if the way it is with COVID right now, that we all have to be cautious. So as much as I was hoping that the vaccine would allow us to all do that, it's this virus has shown that it can break the vaccine in some people. So.
Yeah. Okay. And Kathleen, did you want to weigh in on it?
Well, I mean, just in many of the meetings that I've been having with other organizations, we're supposed to be live next month, and now they're not. So the REBA board is now going to be Zoom. I think the Planners Association thing, that's in September, that's now on Zoom, not live. So everything seems to be backing off due to, I think Cheryl and I were both at the same meeting. And, you get that phone call that says, oh, guess what? And you're thinking, oh my God, my whole life just went into the drain. Sorry. Do I have enough peanut butter to get me through 2 weeks? Yeah, this is just, So, I think at least for September, and I will be traveling in October. And so overseas. And so I'd like to stay safe.
Okay. Well, that's a very good reason. These sailing trips are important for Kathleen's mental health. So it's for all of us. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, that was easy. I'm glad we're pretty much unanimous. So we will do virtual for September, and we will revisit at the end of September, unless Tim or Allison can flag us and say they need to know, and then we would decide, at the next meeting, we could just decide 2 or 3 meetings out as needed, as Tim sometimes has to do postings and such. So we might, but for now, Tim, does it work if we just say September? Or, okay, let's do that.
So Denny,
yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to please finish your thought, but I did have another comment about meeting dates, okay?
Okay, yes. Okay, so the next meeting dates we were thinking of were September 9th and September 23rd.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think I mentioned at one of our meetings that my daughter's going to be moving to France to take a job for a year. And it was a little bit unclear until very recently when we would accompany her over there. And it turns out it's going to be the 23rd.
Oh, okay.
So if we can reschedule that meeting earlier in the week, that would allow me to participate before we leave.
Okay, let me just check with Tim. Did you post the 23rd meeting yet?
No. So that's up for grabs.
Okay, so we could go earlier. We could go.
I could do any of the other days that, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday that week if others can.
Okay, I could do the 21st or 22nd. Do either of those days work for you, Meredith? The 21st or 22nd?
They both do.
Okay, how about you, Kathleen?
Those are fine so far.
All right, then let's say the 22nd, which is Wednesday. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
It's the first day of autumn.
Oh, nice.
Well, thank you for your understanding and accommodation, everyone.
And you know what? When Rich joins our call, let's try to double check that with Rich, but because we could always shift to the 21st if he can't do the 22nd. But let's assume he can do the 22nd for our purposes now. And September 9th is fine with everyone?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so I guess we'll hold off on the minutes until Rich joins us. His son has a baseball game, I think. So he's going to be joining us from his phone in the car once he gets the kids set up. So he's really
man, it's a hot night for baseball.
Yeah, I guess July was rained out, so he has like baseball games like every other minute. So
he'll be playing in December to make up the time.
Yeah, so he's probably regretting being coach.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right, so we could do our staff update.
Thanks, everybody. It's good to be at the planning board. I've missed a bunch of meetings because of 40B hearings, but they're they're in a position now where they're doing some homework. So I'm able to join you, which is nice. A lot of stuff that we have been up to. To say nothing of American Rescue Plan Act funds that I think everyone in town is kind of thinking, how are we going to spend this money? We've been looking at a lot of different eligible activities. I don't have a number for what the town is eligible for, but we get money from through the state and through the county. And the Select Board Finance Committee has been sort of soliciting ideas from departments about different eligible activities and projects. So we've been reviewing things related to housing, things related to condition of public buildings. So as that kind of goes forward, we'll keep you updated. And in your travels, if you have any bright ideas about the ARPA money is supposed to be to help cities and towns and governments recover from COVID impacts. So there's a lot of sort of directly COVID related stuff. But there's a lot of eligible activities in terms of economic development, in terms of lead abatement, weatherization of congregate settings and public housing. So we're looking into those different types of activities, and we'll be making some recommendations to the Select Board Finance Committee. Hopefully everyone has taken the bike survey. If you haven't, you should. It's there's a link to it in the news section on the town website. I might have emailed it around as well. That survey went live maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. We have more than 400 responses, which I think is pretty wild, considering it was literally just posted on the website, on social media. Folks picked it up, word of mouth. Milton Scene did a post about it, I think. So that's a good response rate so far. We're doing some more targeted outreach towards different populations. I have to double check and see if it made it into the superintendent's correspondence to parents and students, because we want to make sure we get kids. But so that is that's moving along. The MAPC team met with the Bicycle Advisory Committee on Monday. They'll probably want to meet with the Master Plan Implementation Committee at some point soon. Our goal is to kind of keep that survey up, through September. And we want to be able to start having, at least one public meeting in September, and then kind of figure out, exactly what type of, again, more targeted outreach we want to do. We're really interested in reaching young people. Kids are riding their bikes to school like it's the 50s. It's crazy. And we want to make sure that, we center those voices because it's really important for those kids to have a place to ride their bikes. It's on the agenda, so I won't go too far into it, but we had a staff kickoff meeting with Dotson and Flinker earlier this week. They wanted to have a sort of part 2 to that meeting involving the planning board and involving a kind of a walk through the district. We kind of gave them a little bit of the history and the purpose and the kind of goals of the zoning. But hopefully, members of the planning board will be able to speak a little bit more thoroughly towards that. But we'll talk about that meeting in a little bit when it's on the agenda. One thing, and it was a reason why it was important to kind of sort out, at least for the next couple meetings, whether we're going to be remote or in person. We have to, and this is, I own up to a good portion of this in terms of the 440 Granite Ave public hearing. Long story short, we've got to renotice that hearing. The reason being, I think it might have been July 16th was the meeting, was the last sort of substantive hearing on that topic. And that was continued to August 12th. In the meantime, we got a letter from the applicant that said, actually, anyway, the chain of kind of continuance of that hearing was broken because, we got a letter in between 2 meetings that said we're actually going to extend out to September, so don't worry about it. Didn't make it out to the agenda. So, you've got to keep up that chain of continuance at a public hearing. So even if there's no testimony or evidence or anything, you've got to, open the hearing and then continue it to a date and time in the future. So that chain got broken. So we've got to just renotice it. Technically it's a new application, but it's all the same material. Everything that we've gotten so far is incorporated into that new application. Put it back in the newspaper. I'm going to ask the planning board to put the bill on that one. We've got money in the budget for advertising and postage. This was technically our mess up, and by ours I mean mine. We've got budget for it. It's not a big deal. It's not fair to ask them to pick up the bill for that kind of mistake. It's not going to cost anyone any time. They were kind of looking to come back at the end of September anyway. So it's really just a sort of technical kind of legal notice issue. So, I've got to figure out some language to make sure that notice is clear to people, that it's not like an entirely new project, because people are going to get notices in the mail. We also, just on a more substantive issue, we've gotten, the town engineer has kind of offered a couple edits, but we do have the engineering peer review from Niche Engineers. They were the engineer that the planning board had asked to do a peer review of their stormwater and utility plan. So the two peer reviews that we commissioned, I don't think we'll get it in their hands next week, the engineering, but the traffic peer review they've got. So that's one of the, two of the things that they'll be working on between now and the end of September, is kind of incorporating that feedback and responding to those peer reviews. So hopefully, a lot of those issues will hopefully be settled at the end of on September 22nd now, when we have that hearing. 193 Central Ave, the former Hoosick Club Goddard School, very unfortunately burned down a few months ago. They're coming back. They want to rebuild, and they want to essentially amend their site plan approval that they have. Now it's a substantial amendment, but it's an amendment.
It's just so sad. I mean, the whole thing is just so sad.
Yeah, it's a crummy situation. They're making the best of it, and obviously they've got an approval. They want to hang on to that. We're in the middle of a technical review of those materials. They're mostly okay. I've put it in the town engineer and the fire chief's hands, just to see if there's anything that's kind of jumping out at them. The issue with this project now is they're rebuilding substantially a similar building. They liked that building. They liked the features of it. We can talk about the design of it when we actually get the plans. But the Hoosick Club building was a sort of pre-existing non-conforming dimensional kind of spot. And so in order to get a zoning compliant project, the orientation of the building has to shift. And then also the parking has to shift from behind the building to in front. They've been out in the neighborhood a couple times, talking to folks, trying to incorporate some of the feedback. There's a conversation about location of the dumpsters that they've heard. And I'll let Marion and the applicant talk about this when the time is right. But they're and rightly so, they want to do a zone compliant project because they want to go to the planning board and get their site plan approval, and get their building permit. So that's why kind of just building an identical structure as what was there previously is not in the cards for them, because it would require zoning relief from various setback requirements and parking requirements and everything like that. So it's not going to be necessarily a kind of in and out, just like snap. Because we do have to, review the physical impacts of the new orientation of the building. But the size of the building is almost identically the same. All the uses are still there, are the same. We'll have to take a look at the new site plan, but that's our zoning, requires a certain layout for a building that size type. So that'll be, I think in the next, we'll probably see that one in October, by the time we get the review done and get, something noticed in the mail. So just keep an eye on that, and we'll keep you posted. And hopefully, again, it's not an identical project, but, a lot of the impacts are going to wind up being the same, because the use and sort of the dimensions aren't that different. Just a kind of a quick 40B update. you'll all be hopefully delighted to hear that the Board of Appeals closed the public hearing on the Ice House a week ago tonight. So they are deliberating on a decision on that. I anticipate, I don't know if they're meeting again next week or the week after. You know, who knows, but I really think the wind is blowing in the direction of us having a decision at the next meeting, which would be well, I guess technically the second 40B project that we've ever approved, 7-Eleven being the first, but I guess the first one that we are fans of. So that'll be good. I think that process has gone pretty much as good as it gets for 40B. You know, the applicant is very responsive to our feedback. You know, it's, you know, all in all, I think it's a pretty good project. So it'll be a nice little feather in our cap. We'll get some units out of it. We'll, you know, advance portions of the housing production plan in terms of new homeownership and new housing types, and hopefully get a little bit of commercial activity in a neighborhood that has been really asking for it for quite some time. So that's really exciting. 648.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. Can I ask a quick question? Tim, if that does get approved, what's the timeline for when that would actually count toward the safe harbor? I know that alone won't get us there, but when did that unit start actually counting?
So on a comprehensive permit, the units count towards your inventory once they're approved. And Kathleen, is there like then like an appeal period, like you file
the building? Yeah, the 20-day appeal period, and yeah.
And then we've got to send, you know, a form to DHCD.
You have to send the form into DHCD, and they have to look at it and all that sort of stuff.
So it's, you know, as instantaneous as it gets in these matters. You know, everything has the appeal period that you've got to contend with, and then there's a little bit of paperwork, but there's no, I mean, for instance, and you know, the other example is a project like Winter Valley, for instance, which you know, even though, you know, they may get a project that's permitted through a special permit process, but because it's not a comprehensive permit project, those units won't count on our inventory until there's a building permit that's issued. You know, there's different classifications of these projects at these. The important thing to note, just sort of, you know, in the future is, you know, for a comprehensive permit project, you know, you get them once they're permitted, and then if there's not a building permit that's issued within 12 months, then those units come off the inventory until there's a building permit. And then once there's a building permit, if another, I think it's 18 months go by and there's no certificate of occupancy issued, then those units come back off until there's a certificate of occupancy. So DCD is interested in kind of making sure that the units actually get built. And so that's why those kind of triggers are in there. So, you know, really for safe harbor through the housing production plan, we're looking at Ice House, and 582 Blue Hill Ave is the next one kind of in line. And that'll be, I think exactly enough units to get us 2 years of safe harbor through the housing production plan. So we've got to go through all of the open hearings that we've got right now, unfortunately, and that's pretty much all of them. We have 16 Amore Road is open, 936 Brush Hill Road is open. I'm expecting 728 Randolph Ave in the very near future. So those will all be open public hearings that we have to just get through. But once we have safe harbor, you know, we get 2 years of saying no thanks to anything that is not on the horizon right now, which, you know, there's nothing on my horizon right now, but that could change at any point. You know, these things are surprising.
If 582 goes through a long appeals process, would your concept be that, oh, then it would go to the next 40B would get us there, or the Winter Valley?
So if the Board of Appeals says we're going to approve this project, it's got 84 units rental, so we get credit. It's the same thing, you know. The Board of Appeals issues an approval, we file it with the clerk. 20 days go by. Well, Kathleen, help me out here. So do we get those units? So if
we get them, yeah.
Right. So they'll have been approved, but then if there's an appeal, and it's a lengthy appeal and it prevents a building permit from being issued, then you've got to worry about a year from now, if they haven't been issued a building permit, then those units will come off. It's an open question as to what I think we get to keep the safe harbor, even though technically the units will have come off, but let's not talk about that too much in case DHCD is listening, because I actually don't know what what you do in that situation. But we will have at least had the year if that in the very, very worst case scenario. But that's just how the program works. 648 Canton Ave. Hi Cheryl. Do you not want to chat about this one?
Well, I have to recuse, so if you're going to spend much time on it, or if it's just like administrative, though, I don't think we deliberate or discuss, then I don't have to.
Yeah, I'm just here to tell you that public hearing has had a pretty lengthy break, but it's coming back after Labor Day. We'll take some time in a future meeting to talk about it in a little more detail, but we don't need to have Cheryl kind of leave the room. I probably explained this in the past before, but we did get applications at the Board of Appeals for 16 Amer Road and 936 Brush Hill Road. We have the ability under the 40B regulations to stay those hearings until we get a couple other hearings off the docket. So those are technically open, but we're not hearing testimony. We're not taking evidence. They're kind of on pause.
Yeah, we can do, because you can do that because you have so many applications, but those won't get kicked out if we have a safe harbor. I think sometimes people expect that, when we get this safe harbor, we can start saying, no, we can't. Those are already applications that have been filed, even if the hearings haven't been opened yet. Yeah. So that's why everybody's throwing these applications in, because they know we've got something, coming up that would give us that safe harbor. So if you've been thinking about anything, you're going to throw the application in just to have it on the books.
Yeah, which is great.
Tim, Danny, question about 582, if I may.
Yep.
Denny and I attended one of their meetings a month or so ago and gave the planning board's views as we discussed. And if they're getting close to closing the hearing, do we need to prepare our suggested conditions at this point?
I thought Kathleen did a draft.
You did that.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. We thought it had to be in earlier than that.
Yeah.
So we did that.
Okay.
Let me just, if I'll double check and make sure that's gotten into their hands. Check on PB 582. Okay. They're actually they're meeting with the fire chief tomorrow morning to kind of get a couple of questions about fire access. I come from firefighters, but I still learn so much about how they fight fires. It's really, his big deal is, how do I get in the front door? Because if you can imagine, we have very few buildings that actually burn to the ground these days, thank heavens. But we do have a lot of, something happens and someone falls down the steps, or they have a heart attack or whatever, and they're not cranking the ladder up to the back of the building for that. They're going in the front door. And so it's much more important for them to have a place to park the truck where it's not going to be disruptive and be able to see right where that front door is. So that's a big concern on a lot of these projects. So it's interesting. If you're ever designing a multifamily building, make sure you know where the front door is. That's all I got on the staff update right now. I can probably think of a couple other things, but I won't take too much more time. And then, so that's it for now. Hard at work.
Okay, well, thank you for that update. All right, so
Danny, may I ask a question of Tim? Did you say that we're going to have a discussion on the agenda about the design guidelines and setting that date coming up? Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Can I just throw in a couple of updates on the affordable units for Walcott Woods? There are the 2 units on Brush Hill Road that are going to be going to the select board for a local initiative program approval for DHCD. So they get on the RSHI. So the select board voted last night to sort of sign the take that application. The select board also last night talked about the Governor Stoughton property. There's been some movement finally with the Attorney General's office to allow the trustees to go forward with an RFP for an affordable housing project on that site. Still obviously a moving target, but as I said, there's been some movement on that property. And as I said, so we looked at the Walcott Woods permitting just to see what the timing was for affordable units for that project. So I just wanted to report on the fact that those two things are moving along.
Thank you for that update. I noticed that we have a couple of citizens here. We have Douglas Henry, so I'm guessing he would like us to get to our discussion on the memory clinic. And we have Stephen Gallagher, and I imagine he's looking forward to us talking about the Walcott Woods design. So I think the Douglas Henry, the memory care facility zoning discussion was going to be pretty brief. So I guess if it's okay, I'll open it up to citizens speak. Then I would do the memory care facility, and then we could do the Milton Village. I'm sorry, not the Milton, but the Walcott Woods.
Kenny, I think Ned Corcoran was going to be here. Oh, he just
there he
showed up,
is.
actually. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's good. And that way we can let people go home, and then we can just talk all night. Well, I'm joking. I really. Okay. So okay. So I welcome Douglas Henry to come in and join us.
Do you want to do the general citizen speak first?
Yes.
If somebody wants to talk about something else?
Thank you. Yes. Let's open it up to citizens speak first. Does anyone want to speak about anything on our agenda or not even on our agenda? I guess that would be Elaine Carroll or Mary Noble, who happen to be on the call with us, but no pressure. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So let's move on to our next topic, the memory care facility zoning as a possible winter town meeting article. The only thing that I was going to add to this is that we're looking forward to hearing, Ned's update in the fall, in September. So I open it up. I noticed
before we take their comments, I just wanted to point out that I think we had a misapprehension at our last meeting that this potential article was a citizens petition, but it isn't. It's being proposed as an article for this board to consider. They may put it on as a citizens petition later on, but that's not what this article is being proposed as an article being supported by the planning board. Last time around, we had a discussion that seemed to indicate a different path.
Well, I actually beg to differ with you. It had never gone to that next level. We had never decided that as a board. It was presented to us as a citizen article, and we had never as a board decided to move it to anything else. There was discussion, we could try this, we could try that, but we had never as a board decided anything beyond that.
I think that's incorrect, but I'm sure that Ned and Doug will have their own statements to make about that.
Okay. Well, I think we would have had to have had a unanimous agreement to change paths, but I welcome hearing from anyone else on the board that would like to speak, and then I open it up to Ned or Mr. Henry if they have any questions or if they have any comments they'd like to share with us. Anyone on the planning board wish to speak?
Well, I would just say that I don't recall that we took a vote on whether we would move forward with an article. But there was certainly discussion that, at least I expressed my preference that if we were supportive of amending the assisted living article, that it come through the planning board and not a citizen's petition, because it puts more control in our hands in terms of crafting it. So I just wanted to make that clarification. I think we talked about how the Winter Valley as a citizen's petition put us in the position of wanting to change language that we were not the authors of. And so all we could do was make suggestions to the petitioners about whether what we would like to see, and they didn't have to take our suggestions, and then we could get to town meeting and we could propose our own amendments. But it's not as clean cut, I think, as us sponsoring it. So I guess, it seems to me that the board needs to come to some understanding about whether we think it's a good idea. And if we think it's a good idea, are there outstanding issues that we would like addressed before we move forward with it? Or do we not think it's a good idea? I don't think we should be in limbo land for a lot longer, I guess is my view on it.
Okay. All right. So a proposal was brought before us. It was a citizen article. We were waiting to gather information, and we were waiting specifically for September to get a lot of questions answered. And it had not changed into anything else. There was discussions of different paths we could take, but we hadn't gone down those paths. We were waiting for information from Ned. Ned representing his clients, but it was Ned's proposal that we were working on. So let's carry on. Anyone else on the planning board? Meredith, did you want to hear from Mr. Henry and Mr. Corcoran, or did you want to?
Yes, I want to hear what they have to say, because I think they've sort of brought this to us, and I would like to hear the direction that they would like to go. And yeah, I think we should.
Great. Okay. I guess I'm interested in hearing from Mr. Henry, let's hear from Mr. Henry, and then Mr. Corcoran, and then Mr. Henry if he wants to again.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello. It's nice to see you this evening.
Yeah. So, Ned may want to jump in on this, but we had a Conservation Commission walk, which I think the chairperson and Kathleen are both on, and that's been extended till September. I think the applicant is redoing their design, so we don't really know exactly what they're proposing at this point, which has some bearing on the articles, because the article has to, as you do it in Milton, it has to sort of follow what they want to do, at least site specifically. I know Kathleen drafted an amendment. She worked on the amendment that's been out there to make it city town-wide, which I think makes sense. But at this point in time, we don't really know what they're exactly proposing. I know Ned has told me that they're going to move it further away from my client Karen Bacardi's property line. So until we see their additional drawings or what they plan to do, I'm not sure we can really comment on the zoning at this point. I think I gave a letter at the last hearing I was at about what we wanted to see. I know that Cheryl made some comments and Kathleen made some comments on the zoning, but we're sort of waiting to see what the new proposal is before we sort of comment on that zoning. So maybe Ned can tell us where they are at this point.
Mr. Corcoran, would you like to speak this evening? Would be very interested to hear any thoughts you might have.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Let's see. I guess a couple of things. One is Doug, Mr. Henry's right. We did have a preliminary hearing with the Conservation Commission. We did have a site walk. You and Kathleen were there. in light of information that came from that hearing and other things, we have upgraded our stormwater and floodplain analysis and are filing that for consideration of the Conservation Commission on the 14th. That's their next meeting. So Tuesday night, the 14th, will be before the Conservation Commission. With that, we've done a considerable amount of work on amending a proposed site plan, and we're close to ready to share that with neighbors. And then with the board, we have always intended to share with neighbors, obviously Doug and his client, and others before we submit to the board. And our expectation that we'll have something to share with them before the 9th, if not before the 9th, certainly before the 23rd. And I think those are your two next nights.
Yes, with one exception, now we're looking at the 22nd because one of our board members can't make it on the 23rd. So just for your calendar, it looks like our meeting will be on the 22nd. Rich Beeler might join our meeting and it might change to the 21st, but right now it's on the 22nd.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you. But we'll certainly we'll have shared new information with neighbors, et cetera, before then. With respect to the approach to zoning, I think it's really important for anyone to understand what we think the board's approach to zoning may want to be. To clarify, citizens petition is really a legal term of art. It is a petition that is submitted by registered voters of the town. The materials that were submitted were materials that I prepared to submit to the planning board with the hope that the planning board, as Cheryl said, would adopt it as its own language and present that to town meeting either this fall or this winter. It has not been filed as a citizen's petition. That's just a technical matter. I know that there are two sort of iterations of a proposed bylaw out there. There's the last draft that I think Cheryl commented on probably a month or so ago on the draft that we had submitted. And then there's a separate draft that Kathleen has prepared that's much simpler, but which would intend to make it a more generic approach. And I think it's really important for us, for the abutters, for everybody to understand what the planning board's approach would be if it's going to advance zoning to town meeting in January. Are you interested in pursuing a more generic approach, which we would certainly support? Or do you want to address it as a site-specific zoning, which we would also support? And we will work with the board in either capacity, but I think the board really needs to sort of give some guidance, if you will, so that we're all working on the same document. We're not working on two different documents and then trying to figure out which one maybe at some time later is one that goes forward. And so we're really anxious to hear whether it's tonight or the 9th or the 23rd, what the board's intent would be if it is going to advance a planning board article to town meeting.
Denny, may I jump in for just
yes.
a suggestion? We have talked about this, I think at various board members over time on the planning board about the differences between zoning for a project and zoning for a use and the problems that we have with zoning for a specific site. And I'd like to suggest, because the professional in the room on this is our Director of Planning and Community Development. And I would like to have him give us his view on, from a professional planner point of view, if the town decides that assisted living and memory care is an appropriate use someplace in town, how could zoning be crafted that could provide the protections that people might be interested in? Because likely the abutters to one of these facilities would be single family, right? So we know that we have assisted living and not necessarily assisted living, but we have elderly housing such as Fuller Village that is of a building type that's very comparable to assisted living. And they have setback requirements and they have certain things that are already in our zoning that applies to that. So I don't necessarily want to add to planning department's burden or list of things to do. But I think it might be beneficial for our board to get their input. One of the challenges with our zoning code is all of the appendices, which are site-specific zoning. And as a architect who works with zoning codes in other communities, because we have to design to those zoning codes or look or seek the variances to those zoning requirements, I don't come across that kind of zoning code in my work. And so, and Kathleen, as an attorney who does this kind of work, she and I have talked about this because it's our work. We're not planners professionally, but we work in real estate. And so it's one of the reasons that she and I think may view this in a similar way. And so to help us, those of us who may have differing opinions on this, I do think it would be useful, not necessarily tonight, but at an upcoming meeting to help guide us into a good path.
I'm always interested to hear what our staff thinks on anything before us. I think that I haven't seen the proposal or the most recent proposal yet, and I was waiting to see that to decide. But I think I was also leaning toward the option of trying to take on the proposal as a planning board's article. But I was also respecting that it came to us with Ned initially saying he wanted it on the fall town meeting as a citizen's article. And so that's where we started. And that's where we started. And we never had consensus to change paths. And I wasn't suggesting that we even make a decision on changing paths until we had a more fleshed out proposal of what the, Ned's clients wanted on that property. And they seem to need to work through a number of conservation and wetland issues. So wanted to give them the space to do that.
So Denny, the thing about that is that's the site-specific zoning model, right? So what we're talking about is that versus something more general.
I know, but we're talking about three things. We're talking about three things. We're talking about a citizen's petition. We're talking about taking ownership as a planning board. And then if we take it as ownership as the planning board, there are two paths we can do. Site-specific, which it wouldn't actually be site-specific. We would find a way that it could work in at least that site. And then a more generic approach that Kathleen has brought up a couple of times. And I believe you have brought it up as well, Cheryl. So there's a couple different paths to take. And I'm not even committing to the planning board taking it on yet, because I don't know, I was waiting for the proposal to see if we even wanted to, go forward on it, if we would in fact support something like this. So still waiting for that information.
Well, respectfully, Denny, it's a planning board, and our job.
I mean, try to be careful when you say respectfully, and you're kind of having a raised voice, and it doesn't really sound respectful.
Well, I'm probably too far from the microphone. But respectfully, I'm just trying to say, and if we were in the room, that would be a different sound. But as I said, it's the microphone, not me. But I'm trying to say that it's a planning board, and we have a job of planning. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And there is a need in the town in general for assisted living, memory care, all kinds of things to address that sort of aging population that we have, to be a support to the existing facilities that we do have already, none of which have memory care. And so I think it's a responsibility of a planning board to take a broader view to see what is required, what is necessary to make our town better. And so I think the site-specific stuff that has been the tradition of the town is, I think, a total problem. we pass zoning, we have all these amendments that sit there in the book and never get used. And so because the project fails. And so then we get stuck with all these appendices of things that nobody ever touches again. So I do think it's our responsibility and our duty and obligation as a planning board to do some planning. And so I think this is a reasonable topic for us to take up, whether in the end, because the planning board doesn't vote to support the article, then somebody says, okay, fine, I'll do it as a citizen's petition. I mean, that's just a default, but I think we should be doing our job, and our job is to do some planning.
But we also do have a Milton Hospital in front of us that owns a parcel of land. They would like to put a memory clinic on it. And we have to be considerate of what is before us. So I think these are all very important discussions to have. So I'm happy to keep the discussion going.
I'd like to make another suggestion, Denny.
Okay.
I had made the one about the, getting staff input, but the other I'd like is if we could get a copy of the survey of the property. One of the things I mentioned was, what are the adequate protections? And what we normally look at are setbacks, height restrictions, buffers, certain things that would provide protection. So sometimes minimum lot size for something. But the zoning code, and maybe Tim, this is something that you could, I don't know this off the top of my head, but I have a recollection that when you have a building of a footprint that's greater than certain size, maybe it's 5,000 square feet. I'm just doing that off memory, so that might not be the size. But once you get a certain size footprint and you get a certain size height, you have to have a greater distance from your property lines for your setback. And so that's a way to address uses, I think, that were Dover Amendment type uses. So like educational facilities, houses of worship, et cetera, where you're going to have a larger structure, you have a greater setback. So our zoning code already has some of these kinds of provisions. It's just that we don't see them very often, because they don't come to us as frequently as other kinds of applications. So I'd like for us to look at, what do we have? What did we do for protections? Put it in a chart. What did we do at Wolcott Woods? Because we gave a lot of consideration to setbacks and view quarters there. What do we have, like I just mentioned, on these larger structures when you have a certain size footprint and height for setbacks? Because this could inform us whether it's for site-specific type zoning or something that's more general when we're dealing with a larger structure, a larger footprint, slightly different use.
Okay.
And then even like, what were the setbacks at Fuller Village? Because, a lot of times people will say, well, we don't have that here, or, but we do have larger buildings here. And what about them makes them blend in and work well? It's something we can analyze. It's not something that we have to make a conjecture about. It's something that we can say, this is what has worked pretty well, actually, or this doesn't, Right. And so that's where if we had, I have actually, so just one last thing on this. In the past, when I was doing the graphic analysis and comparing the 40Bs to our other larger scale buildings in town, I did collect from Bill Clark site plans for Fuller Village and for other places. And elevation. So I actually have a lot of this information as well. So I could work with staff and to come up with this kind of, let's learn from what we've already been doing in town analysis. So again, I'll throw that out there.
Okay. I would have to understand if we did a more of a generic path with, I do like the memory care product. I do think that it's great to have a memory care facility in our town. Multiple is fine, but here's the challenge. Would this override zoning everywhere? So we're currently zoned A, B, C, AA, and all that. And you could just say, okay, well, what's zoned residential could now be a 76 unit memory care. That might, I I mean, even with great setbacks and this and that, I would have to understand the impact to the whole town, and to the various zoning districts, because we hear again and again from neighbors, you know, and I mean, your neighborhood is going through with a 40B that, you know, I bought into zone whatever with so many acres per house lot or partial acre per house lot. I expected that to be what I would be living next door to. I wasn't expecting to be living next to a memory care unit, even though I think a memory care unit is a wonderful thing. I would need to understand the impact of that size development in the various places where it could go, which is, I would think, of a larger study process, a larger public vetting process. And doing these public hearings in a pandemic is an extra challenge. It would be an extra challenge to the staff, I would think. But I'm willing to explore both paths. I'm interested to hear what the staff thinks. But meanwhile, we do have Milton Hospital, who's trying to work on this on a specific parcel of land that they own, and they're going to want an answer too.
So Jenny, just on this specific, if I may, again, one of the concerns I have is that, you know, we're talking about a particular project as if we have an application before us. And
we have a proposal before us that was presented as a citizen petition that was getting rushed to fall meeting. It was postponed because the proposal was not fleshed out yet. So,
but even, I'll just point out in Wolcott Woods, for example, you know, there was planning work done there to arrive at some zoning, but that zoning has had to be revised, and the plan has changed numerous times as they got into more development detail, you know, looking more at how this would blend into or fit into that site in a more detailed way, which only comes through the additional work. You know, it's not done at the upfront before you have a permit, because it would be very expensive to go to the level of engineering and other kinds of work before you knew that you could actually do it. But but the expectation may have been from people, that's the exact project we're going to get, because that's what that zoning was written around, and that's what we supported. And there can be a problem with that if it actually doesn't work properly when we actually get the application. And my concern is there's a lot of things in the application that we're not going to vet out during a zoning, sort of a preliminary analysis of a planning exercise with zoning. So I just like to add the caution, because I think there might be a misunderstanding, particularly in the public, about the difference between writing zoning and issuing a special permit. And
we don't have a special permit application before us.
No,
we don't have a project before us.
Well, and that's the concern I have about waiting for a more revised design, because I think we can be thinking about issues that we already know about. We already know that we are concerned about topographic change. We know we're concerned about access roadways being up near property lines without adequate buffers. We know that we
can talk about this
too much cutting and putting a building down in a hole. You know, so we can already say a lot of the things that we know are issues, and we don't have to have a design resolution. That design resolution wouldn't come for many months. And
we can start to think about those things, but I think we should probably go on to some of our other items tonight too.
Wait a second, Jenny, do we have to decide? You said we needed to make a vote to decide whether or not we would consider assisted living zoning. Did you say that? You said that.
Well, we had never, I think Kathleen, I think perhaps you thought we should go in a direction, and you went and had, you know, discussions with, you know, Mr. Corcoran and Mr. Henry and others, but that wasn't necessarily where the planning board was, and it's not a unilateral thing. It's something that we decide.
That's why I'm asking.
But we haven't decided that as a planning board.
But I would.
That's something you would like.
I would like to propose a motion, if we need one, to say that I would have a motion before the planning board to consider the adoption of assisted living, bylaw for consideration by town meeting.
You can make that
Noted.
motion. I just think it's premature because we're getting a fleshed out proposal from Mr. Corcoran next month. And at that point, it would seem to me that that is the time that we would just, start to.
Why do we have to wait a month? Why would we just have a motion? We're not going to do it tonight, but you could then, because you have said earlier that we hadn't taken any steps. So why don't we take the step of saying, yes, the planning board would like to investigate a potential bylaw for assisted living in the town of Milton as generic, as that, and then, that allows for the discussion of any number of opportunities or different projects or different paths to go. But you had said earlier that we hadn't taken a position on this. So don't you think I'd like to have a motion that says that we do?
I think I like what Cheryl mentioned is I think we should really hear from our planning department on which direction they think we should go with this, and just sort of have some counsel and have the discussion. I think
that's the same thing, Meredith. I agree with you. Absolutely.
Right. So
I agree with Cheryl.
Tim has not had a chance to really,
absolutely
give us his input on this. And also, I think what I would be concerned, I just don't want to plan something that doesn't work for Milton Hospital and go through a exercise and
Exactly.
so
absolutely, Meredith.
we don't want to go to all that work. And then the applicant before us, we can't go to town meeting because that's not going to work for him. And the
I completely agree with you. All I was saying, I was addressing Denny's earlier statement that that the planning board hadn't taken any position on this. And not that we didn't need a position, but the planning board hadn't decided whether to pursue this idea in any iteration. So I was just trying to address that hole that Denny had pointed out, that we hadn't made any kind of decision as a board to consider a zoning for assisted living. And that's all I'm asking.
Well, I think we are considering zoning for assisted living. I just think that we hadn't decided. I think that you were kind of going on your own path without really getting the consensus of the board. And I absolutely
said that nobody had any consensus, and it never was proposed as anything other than my idea.
Great.
Never had planning board stamp on it, was never sent to all the planning board members. It was never circulated that way. It's only my approach to it, and never had the imprimatur of the planning board anywhere near it. So.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So we'll continue these discussions. It'll be on our agenda. This will be on our under town meeting articles, fall, winter, between now and winter.
Can we just talk about schedule of articles backing up from, again, having been a warrant committee member and understanding the time frames that are pretty long, between when the warrant opens and closes and when it goes to print and so forth. And I know we've talked about this in the past, and certainly we're past the deadline for anything for the fall, anything new. But I think we're probably approaching pretty soon the deadline for winter. And I'd like to just understand so that we can plan properly, in our next meetings.
Okay.
So Tim or Ned, would you happen to have those, some idea of those timeframes?
I don't, but I can get them and get that to you guys. I'm out of the office tomorrow, but we can get that to you on Monday. What that schedule looks like.
Okay, so I'd like to make I think Kathleen did make a motion, and maybe we can ask Kathleen if she would say that motion, or if she wants to pursue it. But my suggestion is that we allow a good, robust discussion of this at our next meeting, because I think we're going to run out of time otherwise. And I would like, as I said before, to hear from Tim, and if he has time to look at what's in our other sections in terms of this setbacks with footprint sizes and so forth, that could be helpful to our discussion. If he doesn't have time for that, I will see if I can find some myself. Having just returned from vacation, though, I am trying to catch up on all my workload. But in any case, I do think it's important just to have the time frame, to work with an appropriate time frame. Because my experience has been the board ends up missing, targets that we would have liked to have hit because we're not cognizant early enough of what those deadlines are.
I would just put in that my best guesstimate as to when the warrant might close would be sometime early November.
Yes, it's not a lot of time.
All right, well, thank you. So I look forward to having that discussion at our next meeting. All right, so we have Stephen Gallagher still here. So let us talk about Walcott Woods. Tim, did you want to set us up a little bit, or should it's the Milton Village Design Guide? No, I'm sorry, it's not. It's the Walcott Woods. There's an insubstantial change to the special permit. My understanding is that they're adjusting one type of housing stock for another type of housing stock that they've already got on their plans, which would improve the relationship of the structures to the topography. One quick question I had was, would there be any change to the footprint height or size and square footage?
Let me just tee up a couple introductory things. First of all, could Stephen Gallagher be promoted to panelist? Because he'll have some details about the specific proposal. But you all may recall a couple instances since this special permit was granted, where we've had similar type requests for what the special permit calls an insubstantial amendment. I think the last one we did was, the special permit kind of contemplates, this type of townhouse structure versus this type, and they're all laid out on the site plan. One of the first changes that was made to the special permit was a change in the architects, and sort of the drawings, were updated after that change was made, and that has kind of precipitated a number of changes that I think are considered to be insubstantial by the planning board, in the sense that they're not changing the unit count, they're not changing the actual. There's no new designs that are coming out of anywhere. It's just really kind of reorganizing, rearranging things that are already kind of approved on the site. And so this change, and I'll let Stephen speak for himself in a minute, this change is kind of a cascading effect of the last change that was made, and basically making sure that we don't have two of the same type of building type next door to each other. I think MATV may be monitoring another meeting right now, but do I have hosting abilities? I don't. Julia, you're a co-host. Can you make me a co-host? Or at least try to get Stephen into the meeting. Julia, you there? Okay, well, maybe.
Mr. Gallagher's coming in now.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you. Sorry I know you guys have 100 things going on. Thanks for.
Don't worry about it, Tim.
So that's that. And just before Stephen gets started, and I'll share my screen with the materials that he provided. But the amendment procedure in the special permit basically says that there's kind of a difference between an insubstantial amendment and a substantial amendment, and you know it when you see it, I guess, because what the procedure is the applicant will propose an amendment. They're responsible for notifying the planning board. They're responsible for notifying the neighborhood association and any of the abutting property owners. The way that we have been navigating this requirement in the past is, obviously the planning board has been made aware, and then there is a fairly comprehensive email update list that Northland is also responsible for periodic updates on the project. And so these proposals sort of go out to that update list in advance. Northland sent out the last update a week ago today, with some additional information, and then something about this particular change at the planning board tonight. So if you all believe that this is actually a substantial change, or if someone out in the neighborhood feels that this is substantial, then it's substantial. And so we've got to have a public hearing and a special permit amendment. If everyone agrees that this is a kind of a minor deal, then we can treat it like a minor deal and amend the special permit that way. And they just make the change, and we're off to the races. Once we get through this specific issue, I'm going to ask Steve to talk a little bit more about some future amendments that they're contemplating and what the procedures could be for that. So with that, Steve, I'm going to bring your materials up and you can go ahead and take it away. All right.
Perfect. All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Hi, Stephen.
Hi. Good to talk to you again. So, yeah, we're here just for something that's, I think it's fairly minor. You can obviously see that last year, spring of last year, we came back and we did change the architecture throughout the site. And that was a substantial change. And it did involve some differences to the units. There's still the same number of units, the same types of units, same number of bedrooms, et cetera. But obviously the footprints changed a little bit. The exterior facades changed a little bit. And that has certain ripple effects in terms of, laying things out in the plan. And I think, frankly, they're basically good ripple effects to the extent that they're not just kind of inconsequential technical ones. But because we're fairly constrained with the way that the special permit is written, it's involved us coming back here a couple of times. So in this document, you can kind of see the history of what that was. The blue, hang on just a second. So the blue shows the two clusters. That's the Devon's cluster and the Manor House cluster. Those were both adjusted several months after we got the architecture change, basically reorienting the buildings a little bit to each other, creating a little bit of a more, I would say, kind of design public space. We have a sort of a public square down by the intersection in the Manor House cluster. So those were, they didn't involve changes in the types of units or anything like that, but they were site plan adjustments. And we came back and the planning board did give us permission to do those as minor changes. Several months after that, we moved up the hill to buildings 5, 6, and 11, which are shown in green. And we changed basically what we're doing now, except we did 3 buildings instead of 1. We took the types that were permitted for each of them and kind of swapped them 1 building over. And the reasons for that are kind of technical. It's a good thing. Again, it's basically that when we made this architecture change in the C type, we were able to get a bedroom forward, which allowed us to split the garages in the duplex. So in the original 2019 special permit, all of the duplex types had 4 garage bays in a row. So you have the visual impact of the garage bays, and then you also have a larger, 1 single larger driveway. So, there's various ways you can deal with that architecturally, but it's nicer if you can split it up and make 2 smaller driveways and split up the effect on the facade as well. So by getting the bedroom forward in the C unit, we were able to ensure that wherever there's a C, you have 2 driveways instead of 1. You have 2 pairs of 2 doors instead of 1 string of 4 doors. So it's a substantial improvement, and that's, the majority of the duplex types have that. And again, for kind of technical reasons, it turns out that the C works better in certain ways where relative to the topography, when you're going uphill, you want it to be on the uphill side of a duplex. And so in order to make it work better, we kind of swapped, or we're proposing swapping some of the building types around. And it's not really something that you would notice if you just glance at the site plan. It's keeping the footprints where they are, but it's more, a DB becomes a DC and so on. So you have to kind of work through that, just seeing where the letters go. But in terms of the effect of the density of the site or anything like that, it's really kind of inconsequential. And again, to the extent that it's noticeable, I think driving down the street, it's a positive change. So we've done that, on buildings 5, 6, and 11, as you can see. we're proposing doing that on building 12 now. And just so that we don't, take up too much of everyone's time, we are going to do it once more for the rest of the site. So that'll be a full, that's not a minor change. That'll be a formal amendment to the special permit, but it won't be, we're still going to have the same number of units, same number of bedrooms, and so on, same types of buildings that have already been approved. It's just kind of where they're located. So that's coming up. That's not what we're proposing tonight. And I will say as well, when we do that, the one other thing that we're considering, and we probably will propose, is putting 2 units in the existing Walcott house rather than 1. And that would obviously entail eliminating one of the new units adjacent to it. So basically, if we do that, it wouldn't really make much of a difference in terms of the actual layout of the Walcott house itself, because there's a lot of space in there, but it would actually be a reduction in the physical density of the site. So we're still looking at that. That would be the one kind of variation from, what was approved before, that's going to be rolled into that. But again, that's not something that we're proposing tonight, but just so you're aware, we're not going to kind of come back 20 times and make little tweaks like this. This is kind of just to keep things going and then give us a little breathing room to prepare the actual, full documents for the next one and hopefully final one.
So may I ask a question, Mr. Gallagher? It's Denny Swenson, the chair. I was just wondering, with this change, this proposed change just for tonight, that is before us, would it change the square footage? Would this does this building have a different square footage? When you change a DC for a DV or whatever, are we ending up with more larger buildings or?
So the D is the same essentially, because it still has a D. We're changing essentially a B for a C, and the C does have a little bit more square footage. It's a few hundred square feet. But again, when we deal with this, when we do the rest of the buildings, we're gonna, sort that out. So we're not like.
So in the end, we'd have roughly the same.
Correct.
Because
you'd be
changing a B for a C here, and then later on you'd be changing a C for a B. So in the end, we'll probably end up with the same square footage. Right now, this change alone is a few more square feet.
Yeah.
It's not like hundreds of square feet. It's a small number of square feet.
I'd have to look at the numbers. It's a few hundred, but keep in mind that we actually are capped at 3,600 for each building, and that's a function of the option.
Okay. So you already have a cap. Okay, and that's a function of the formula.
It's unusual as we go around the site that we're going to be maxing that out, and we have in a couple, but most of them we're not. So we're actually staying substantially under what the actual limit is in the special permit with this change.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful, Mr. Gallagher. All right, well, I'm interested to hear what other planning board members think of this. And unless you had any further comments, Mr. Gallagher.
I don't. I'm happy to answer questions though.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Charlotte, change.
Oh, yeah. Meredith, please go for it. Please, Meredith.
I just was saying, I think the change is great. I think it's you're definitely seeing, I think, the benefits, just breaking the massing of those garages. So that's good.
That's great. Thank you, Meredith. I didn't know if Cheryl had a chance to look at the topography. I'm always interested. My little cut and fill buddy, Cheryl.
I took a drive through the development. It was yesterday. And one of the things that I was just noticing that the drawing doesn't do that you can actually see when you're on site is that the 2 units are set at different floor elevations. And one of the things, Denny, you said was that one of the reasons for this change had to do with the topography. So this makes it a little, this is shown in a flat situation, obviously. But I think maybe next time when you come back, I don't have a particular problem with this request, but next time when you come back, if you could include photographs, which show how you are adapting these to the topography, because when Denny first said that, I was thinking it's music to my ears to hear adaptation based on the topography, because that's something that we wanted to see. You know, we wanted to see you make the project better the more you worked on the site. And so I appreciate that. And I think it's just one of the things that maybe you were listening in earlier. It's the kind of thing that happens as you are working and on the project and moving through the site more, that you see more of how to do it, right? I mean, there's only so much that we can visualize in plan and in models and all sorts of other tools that we have. But when you're out on the ground, particularly if it requires some clearing of trees in order to see it, or you start to get the roads in and you start to see the relationship of the structures to the roads and the topography. So anyway, my long-winded response is that I'm glad to see the adaptation of the structures as you move your way through the construction. And I don't see this as being a significant change, and I have no problem supporting it.
Perfect. And to your point, actually, so on that image there on the bottom right is the DC. And then on the left, you see that photo there. That actually is another DC that we're building at Building 5. And you can actually see it's a smaller picture on the screen, but it's split in the center. So that is actually a split finished floor there. You know,
yeah, it's a mirrored version, right? So
it's mirrored, that's right.
Yeah.
But it does have a split finished floor, which makes the building kind of flow with the landscape there.
Yeah, and it reduces the amount of foundation wall that might be exposed if you're setting it at the higher floor, or the amount of retaining wall you might have to do if you were setting it at the other floor height, you know, so it's definitely a good strategy.
Yep.
Kathleen, did you want to weigh in?
Oh, thank you, Denny. I agree with Meredith and Cheryl and presumably you that I believe it's a minor change, and certainly a minor change that's an improvement. I'd like to see garage doors broken up like that. So, and I drove into the site the other day and you know, was impressed. So I'm in favor of it as a minor change.
Okay. And thank you. I also just wanted to thank Mr. Gallagher. It's very nice to see improvements come to us during construction process. And it's nice to see that, you know, your crew is constantly looking for ways to make it better. I think that not only benefits the development, it's a real benefit to the town, and it's actually really nice as a planning board to see that. So thank you very much for working with us. And I do appreciate trying to take an approach to the next changes so that you can come to us and get a whole bunch done at once, so that we can do the whole public process and include the neighbors and abutters and so forth. But I am okay with going forward with this in substantial change. So Tim, in a case like this, do you want me to put this for a vote?
Mary's out in the audience. I don't know if she wants to chime in.
Do we have, would anyone like from the public like to?
Mary, if you want to, if you want to speak up, you can raise your hand. If not, you can sit back, relax.
But it's nice to see you here, Mary. Thank you. Mary's been watching this one from the beginning. So, all right.
But yeah, so a motion approving the insubstantial change as it's been presented by Mr. Gallagher, and then authorizing me to write a letter acknowledging that change would be in order.
All right. All in favor?
You need a second.
Oh, sorry.
Second.
I don't get to make motions.
He doesn't get to make the motion.
That's
So
the
I would make a
one power
motion
that I don't
that,
have.
we make a motion to approve the request for a minor modification to the special permit for Walcott Woods to allow for the design changes requested by the applicant.
that Tim can, I forget what he wanted to do.
Oh, and
to-
that Tim can write a letter
Yeah.
to the building department confirming the change.
Thank you, Kathleen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Could I say it
Okay,
any
I'll-
faster?
I don't know how anybody could say it any faster than that, but thank you for making this meeting pick up the pace. Okay, all in favor, Kathleen,
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes.
Meredith Hall,
Yes.
and I'm not sure, do we have Rich Beeler yet? He's not here yet. Okay. And Denny Swenson is a yes. So thank you, Mr. Gallagher. You're
Thank you.
welcome if you have any closing remarks, or you're welcome to get off a late Zoom call.
Yeah, I think I'll jump off. And as I said, we're going to be back for a more comprehensive one, but it'll be kind of more of the same. Just wrap it
Okay.
up.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Have a nice night, a nice weekend. Bye now. Okay. All right. So I'm just checking. We don't have anyone here tonight for business, so we can go back to our. All right. So I have 237 Hillside Street scenic road approval. Now,
Denny, this might be a little bit of a conversation. I may ask if we can maybe do the scheduling of the site walk first, just to get that out of the way.
okay, let's do that. I suggest we have a site walk. And unfortunately, I wasn't part of the last hearing on this one. So the last time the vote was taken, I didn't participate, so I didn't pay as much attention as the rest of you did. So I really do want to see this before I take a position. So when should we schedule a site walk?
No, I'm talking about the Milton Village site walk.
Oh, okay. Milton Village sidewalk. Okay, I could do September 3rd or September 8th of the days that they offered. Those
So
look-
actually, Denny, if I can real quick, in the intervening period, some of those days have knocked off. So we're talking about August 30th, which is actually probably not in the cards anymore, just from a notice perspective. September 3rd, September 15th, and September 16th. So let's just take the 30th off, because we're just not going to be able to get a notice up in time. And if the planning board's all going to be there, it is out in public, out on the streets. So there's no real concerns about it being a public meeting on someone's private property. So I think we can notice it. But
Was
so
there
the
a particular time, what day that was, like in the morning, was it?
they didn't say anything about a particular time of day, so I think it's kind of up for grabs for now.
All
So,
right.
whatever works for you guys.
The 3rd and the 15th look great for me, but if somebody wanted the 8th, I could try to make that work.
The 8th is out, so don't worry.
Oh, good. Okay, so the
It's
3rd and the 15th.
the 3rd, the 15th, or the 16th.
And do we
Okay.
have a particular amount of time that we should allocate to it?
What do you think? 90
2
minutes?
hours? 90 minutes, 90 minutes. That sounds good.
All right, so I'd like to suggest a Friday, and a Friday morning.
Okay.
I
The
can
3rd is a Friday.
3rd.
3rd is a Friday. Okay.
It's the Friday Labor Day weekend.
Oh, right.
That's
Then
Labor Day
Labor
weekend.
Day.
I unfortunately.
Yeah, that's not ideal. Okay. The 16th is a Thursday, Cheryl. That's a date that they put out there. The 15th is a date that they put out there, but that's a Wednesday.
And it's Yom Kippur. I don't know if that affects anything.
Yeah, it doesn't affect me, but if it affects others, I don't need to do it.
I could do either 15th or the 16th. Either's fine.
Cheryl, do you want to go back to them and ask if they could do a Friday?
No, it's okay. And it's just, let's see, the 15th, as long as it's in the morning, I think, should be
Okay.
okay.
Can't do it.
Can't do it?
The
Okay.
15th in the morning, no.
All
And
right,
I have 16th in the morning?
16th in the morning is
fine.
okay for me.
Okay. I'm an early bird, but I could do 10 or I could do 9, whatever.
And
Earlier is fine with me.
They're driving in from Western Mass, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where are they?
I think they're out in very Western Mass, probably over 2-hour drive. So if they could do 10,
Let's
you
say
know,
10.
On the 16th.
Yeah.
Florence. Where is that?
Lawrence?
Well, Lawrence, that's out there.
That's
No.
not west.
Field, isn't it?
I think of that as
That's north.
Yeah,
That's
that's out on 91. How about that?
Yeah.
Did we say 10?
yeah. In Milton Village, where should we meet in Milton Village? You know, the public parking area in between the wharf and the yacht club?
Yeah, let's just say Wharf Street Park.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
put it right over there. I'd rather meet in the park than the parking lot. There.
Okay. That's a good point.
Yep, that's great.
So 9:16
10 a.m. Okay. All right.
at 10 a.m.
Mhm.
90 minutes. Okay. I will let those guys know. And we'll get that on the books. So thank you
Okay.
for that.
As far as another site walk, did you want to?
I didn't know if anybody wanted to do a hillside street scenic site walk. You may have already gone and looked at that. I have not. Unfortunately, I had some family medical stuff this week. I was hoping to get there before our meeting, but I have not been there yet.
Was that, having been away, was that flagged?
It has been flagged, yes. They flagged out 2 potential layouts. I have photos that I sent to Steve. I don't know if I have them on my machine right now, but it may make sense to go check it out yourselves. I can dig up the photos if you want, but it's it's a little tough to ascertain.
Did people want to just go on their own, or did we want to set up a time where we all go together? I think
I
it's
guess the question would be, if we went together, would the homeowners want to kind of point things out to us? That would be the advantage of going together versus going individually. But
yeah, that's true. We don't want to put the homeowners through 5 different visits from us.
right.
I mean the way I
I wouldn't even get out of the car.
you want to get out of the car, but you can
get out of the
pretty
car, yeah.
and again because the scenic road application is about the walls and the trees. They flagged it out pretty far into the yard, but you're really kind of looking at where it hits the right of way. So it's tough to see in a photograph, but once you're actually looking at it, you can walk right up to the wall. There's some poison ivy, so watch out. But you can sort of get a good idea. I had when I communicated with Steve about this, I kind of let him know there's one layout that's a little bit closer to Harlan Street that looked a little bit better to me. Both layouts very explicitly do not hit any trees. One of them does hit a bush. But one layout is, if you assume that, you want to be as far away from existing trees as possible when you're doing work, there's one layout that I think is clearly superior, just in terms of its ability to kind of navigate around some of the larger trees. So, the project doesn't propose to explicitly knock down trees to build a driveway. But I know there's always a concern when there's construction activity around a tree. So if you're putting a driveway next to a tree, you want to be as far away from that tree as possible.
Yeah, I mean, with the other prior experiences and with information that Bill Clark had conveyed, it's not always clear where the property lines are relative to the walls and the trees. And they didn't have a survey. And I guess, like where we looked at other scenic road applications where there was a survey and there's a landscape architect, it is a bit more information than what we got for this one. And that's why I think we asked for the flags and the staking. So if that's not quite clear enough to us, then I'm wondering whether we consider asking for the survey or the landscape plan. And it's really because I wanting to understand which of the trees are actually on town property and which are not. And, is the stone wall truly on town property? Because that's what we ran into down on Parkwood, right? When all that stuff was removed and they didn't realize it was town property. And then,
well, I think that, Cheryl, the approval is conditioned upon no trees at all being taken down. So it kind of becomes a little bit of a moot point because they can't do the project if they're going to take down a tree.
Well, we've received additional information since we granted that decision, and it's compelling information to me, and I'd like to find a way to see if we can work with them to get something that's, it can accommodate.
But we don't have jurisdiction, Cheryl. We don't have jurisdiction beyond, the public way.
That's my point. Some of this may not even be in the public way. It's like.
So Cheryl, the way the regulation is written, it kind of, it basically says if there's a question, the tie goes to the town. So if it's unclear as to whether a tree or a wall is in the public right of way, if there's like a genuine question, the presumption is that it's in the right of way, which is what brings this, without a survey, you can't know for sure. But I think, looking at the GIS, especially with the walls are pretty clearly on town property, in the town right of way. And even if they were to even if that line moves in a survey, I think it's still close enough to fall under. I mean, the question becomes, if in fact the walls are not on town property, then, the jig is up and they can do what they want.
So if there was something that we saw in a site walk with the flagging that made us want to reconsider the decision, can they, and because the decision needs to be revised anyway, potentially due to the historical commission, would they have an opportunity to reapply for an amendment? I'm just thinking of the mechanism, what we do here.
The regulations don't go into that kind of detail about what happened in a situation like that. So I honestly don't know.
I think the problem we have is that the scenic road bylaw isn't very specific, and it even says that, describing, without the need for additional plans or references. I mean, so, we don't really have a very detailed description of what people are supposed to be providing.
Let's put this on the list of things to address.
Yeah.
Because this gray area is tough,
Yeah, I mean, and I think, I think somebody, when I read this after we got their letter and the decisions from the Historic Commission is that, our decision is faulty. The Historic Commission doesn't get an up or down on this. So they get copied, and we're supposed to sort of consult with them, but we have an obligation to provide a decision within a certain time period. And it doesn't say, oh, we could delay that, to get input from other boards and commissions. So, I think they could make the argument that they have a constructive grant at this point. So much time has gone by, and as I said, I don't think we should have. I didn't read this, and I'm just as much, in error as everybody else. But looking when I pulled out the rules and regulations, we have a time period we were supposed to meet, and putting in a line that says, "Oh, our decision is this, but it's subject to the approval of the Historic Commission," isn't something we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, so this has been a thornier one than usual, and I noted in my memo, the materials didn't get to the Historical Commission in time, kind of on their kind of normal schedule, so I'm not going to ding anyone on that. We wanted to make sure that we got the input of the commission. It didn't happen before the meeting, so the approval is kind of written in a way for it to come after. I don't think the board contemplated that this would be an issue with the Historical Commission. You know, I think, I hope, I hope the tone of my memo was clear and like the tortured nature of this decision.
Oh, no,
It's a
it was
really-
an excellent memo.
It's
It
a,
really
it's, a, it's, a,
was.
it's a really very tough one because it's not like anything that Historical Commission said is, you know, off base from the perspective of, you know, the scenic and historic nature of the property. It's not, it's just, it becomes a kind of more fundamental question of what does the planning board do with the input from other boards that the regulation kind of contemplates. You know, and that becomes.
So Tim, does the Historical Commission have a clear understanding of the scenic road bylaw and what its role is? Because it seems to me maybe we need to provide more guidance to them about what we can take from them as input, or at least what we can do, what information we can consider. Like we can't consider necessarily where one wants to locate their garage, for example. It's not part of our jurisdiction on this.
So I can just tell you, because I've been sitting on the Historical Commission for 15 years, and it's really a consulting. I think it's really consulted for what their opinion is of the really primarily the historical value and the historical landscape, which is part of a historic resource, is the landscape as well as the stone walls, the trees. And so in the context of that, I can also tell you that we've collaborated in finding solutions with the planning board quite frequently. We've come before when the planning board was making their determination, the Historical Commission would actually come and we would meet together and find solutions and ways that things could work. And it's been a sort of a great working relationship. In the 15 years that I've been on and have had review of scenic roadways, never once has it been flat said really turned down as being a bad decision. This was the first time that I've ever seen this happen. And I think what's really important is for our members to go out and do a site walk. I've been out there 3 times, and it's really clear. And I'll just say that it's impossible for them to do this driveway without taking trees down, Tim. And they've said they're not going to, but you'll see the red flag is at the base, 2 to 3 inches away from the trunk of the tree, which has branches that are cascading, you know, over where the driveway would be. So it's impossible to put in a driveway without cutting into the root systems and without taking out limbs. And that's part of what we're looking at, I think, in this. And I think really where, you know, I think trees, I think we could mitigate the stone that's, you know, and replace stone. It's really an issue about how they're going to do this. And I think it's really critical. And I even, you know, if we can have permission to walk onto their property, but even if you stand over the stone wall and you're looking onto the site, you will see the challenge that they would actually have in not removing trees and not changing. And you're right, we can't talk about structures, but it alters the landscape by putting in a modern contemporary structure in there, which I think what we need to do is to stick to the purview of what we can comment on, and that's the preservation of natural resources, environmental values, historical value, scenic and you know, public safety. One of the things that I found that you'll note is that, and this was an issue on Harland, and the only reason why I mention it is because the concern, it was a safety issue of the applicant to remove trees on the scenic roadway. There was a little bit of changing of stone walls, but it was really removing trees because of his site view. When he would pull out of his driveway, that he could not see to his left or his right until the vehicle had actually entered into the street. And what you'll see if you go up there is on Harland and Hillside, that's a real cut through, and cars zip around those corners. By taking a narrow driveway and moving that driveway to that location, it's heavy forestation or vegetation, I should say, on both sides. And to bring a vehicle out at either of those locations, you don't have a sight view to the left or the right without having a much wider driveway access. So that's one of the things just from a safety point of view. And then, obviously the replacement of stone walls and we can talk about and discuss that, but I've never seen, a commission feel that this is more of a significant site being an intersection of two scenic roadways in one of the oldest homes in Milton. I think the date is, Tim, I don't know if you have that, but I think it's like 1795 or early 1800, I think maybe, but I think it's it's a very much of an antique house on a scenic corner. So I think this is really worth going out and doing a real site walk and thinking about the impact of what we would be allowing. So
I think I am just incredibly compelled by the safety of the residents of this home, the safety concerns they have for their children and the incompatibility of uses. And, if it means that they would have to plant 2 more trees where they're taking out wall so that they could have a safe location for their family and take out a tree to put a driveway in. I think, over time, our landscapes change, and what had been, trees certainly, I obviously I value completely, but I was astounded at the situation that exists there, and I think for us to consider a denial on this on the grounds of the loss of a tree would be something I don't support. I think we can manage the loss of a tree by additional tree plantings and work for a best location of the driveway that solves a safety concern for that family and their children. That's the way I view it.
So I'm just wondering, I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with the site as some of you. Is there another possible location for the driveway?
No,
No, there's no
I'm
other.
gonna bring up the GIS map on the screen just to kind of give you an idea of what the issue is. And this is why I kind of try. And in talking with the Powells, they had an issue with the horse barn neighbor, last year, and we're hesitant to kind of rehash some of those issues because a lot of them were settled from kind of a sort of manure management perspective, from lack of a better term. And I think they kind of saw this project as, the best solution was to just provide physical kind of separation. So this is the horse barn here that's kind of associated with 633 Harland. You can see that their driveway kind of comes out to Hillside, and this is the driveway for 237 over here. So when they talk about folks coming in here, bringing horse trailers in and out, this is all 237's property. There's an easement that gives the barn access to Hillside Street over that property, and so the whole game is, how do we get this driveway away from this driveway, right? And so there may be something that folks aren't thinking of, but the most straightforward solution is to put the driveway on the other side of the house in some way. And so that's why, when we talk about, can you put the garage in the back and have the driveway be the same? Well, then you're talking about, what is the setback for an accessory structure on the side or rear? Would they need a zoning variance for that? They have the ability on their site, scenic roads notwithstanding, to have plenty of room from a sort of accessory structure and driveway perspective to put a driveway in a garage, on the other side of their house. It's the scenic road, is the thing that causes them to have to go in front of a discretionary kind of decision-making process.
So,
Tim, can you put the layer of this from this kind of view to the imagery?
So one thing, so when I was talking to actually the previous owner of the property, one of the things that she said she would have done and just never got around to doing is what you can see is the location of the easement, which that is where the crux of the issue is. And I totally understand, and I totally, am very sensitive to this, to the family. But if you moved that easement farther over, there's a buffer of trees which have actually matured since this has come in. But if you moved the easement where the drive more, across from Parkwood or even up a little bit further, that property has plenty of room to move that driveway, move that easement and the access much further away from that driveway, which I think could really resolve some issues and be much more reasonably, more affordable for the homeowners, and sort of be able to preserve that historic corner, separate those easements out, and just
Yes,
Well,
separate
that's a sweet
driveway.
idea, but you have to get the other side to agree to it. You
I
can't
don't
just
know.
move the easement by yourself.
No,
I
no,
think
no.
you can if they own the property. And I think in the letter from the Stokels that they said that they would be, they're absolutely fine as long as they're able to maintain an easement. To the
Well,
barn.
but as I said, we can't ask for that.
No,
We don't have
they
the
have that.
legal
They could
ability
ask
to
for it,
tell
yeah.
somebody to negotiate
No,
an
no.
easement.
No, but I don't know if they know that they can do that they can move the that they can. actually
I'm sure
relocate
they've
the
thought
drive.
of that. It'd be a lot cheaper than building in a garage.
I know. Yeah.
I'm sure that was a discussion, but looking at the correspondence and the situation between the two people, I could see these horse people saying, well, sure, you write us a big check, we'll move the easement. It requires a survey, it requires, a plan that gets recorded, it requires an easement document, it requires release of mortgages. It's not like, okay, just fine, move it. All of this discussion is really useful and interesting, but my problem with this is that I'm reading our rules and regulations, and I think our ship has sailed on this. We had to do a hearing within a certain date. We had a public hearing, and the rules and regulations say the board shall make a decision on the request within 21 days of the public hearing. We're way past that. These people have a constructive grant of their request, as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't say we have to think about it. It says shall make a decision within 21 days.
Tim, can you move, zoom in a little bit, where, let me see if I can do the draw option. It looks to me like this is a path between trees, which, I don't know, there might be something there, but this is the wall. Where are the trees on the property line or on the town property that I'm not seeing here?
Hold on a sec. Can you redraw that? I'm just going to give you a better.
Yeah, if you, I'm trying to understand where, okay, this looks like a clearing. So where are the trees on the town-owned part of the property that interfere with that driveway in that location?
They're in there. If you go out there, you will see, there are trees that are, if you assume that the wall is where it is and the line is where it is, and there is a few feet between the wall and the line here, so there's little room for kind of, there are trees that are right up against the wall that, again, would kind of fall into that category of, it's unclear whether they're on town land or private land, and so the presumption is that they're on town land.
Yeah, so I go back to if they're going to fill this in, and there aren't a lot of trees in this stretch, that, to Kathleen's point, if the decision's already been made and the decision says you're not going to remove trees, then what does that do, Kathleen, if they can't make a driveway? I'm just wondering, is there any?
They'd have to come back because we have a decision. We have a decision that says, yes, you can do it, but you can't remove the trees. And so they have a situation where they have to come back to us.
So if they come back to us, I guess, then that opens up other conversation about whether if there's one or two trees here, can additional trees be put in, and particularly in this location. And you know, whether we have back to an individual or group site walk, it may be beneficial for us to see this together, is my view.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's done.
I know, but if they can't do, like we just talked about, if they can't do it because the trees are impacted, then we will be better prepared if they come back.
Right. Let's offer to do a site walk to the applicant if they want to come back, because they will in fact have to remove a tree. Well,
And I think, you know, and maybe it's not for September, maybe it's not for September 9th or whatever. I do think that, you know, the way this is going, we're all going to have to sit down, us, the historical commission, and the applicant, and figure something out, because you know, I think the situation that Meredith has identified, I think, is probably correct. You know, there's a line or a set of lines that can be drawn on this site that avoid trees. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, those lines are very close to trees, and I think it's reasonable to assume that they just won't make it. And so they've got an approval that says you're not going to take it down any trees. And so it kind of creates this, you know, logjam of, you know, you probably can't do, you know, to Cheryl's point, you know, they'll have to come back if they take down trees. And so rather than waiting for that to happen, you know, let's kind of, you know, they have an approval that they, you know, I do think that Kathleen is probably right, but at the same time, you know, again, the constructiveness of their approval, I think, also has to do with the way that, you know, quite frankly, staff has handled this. And so I'm not kind of prepared to poke that bear. I'd rather kind of get everyone at the table and kind of figure out, you know, if it's stipulated that this driveway needs to be somewhere else, then how do we make that happen in a way that kind of works for everybody? Because you know, Meredith, even if it is, you know, easier than you would think to sort of alter that easement, my concern then is, well, then maybe now is this driveway going to be aligned with Parkwood Drive, which is suboptimal? And then if it goes over here, now you're talking about, well, now we're just putting, you know, the bad use closer to these poor folks at 217. So I do think that, you know, the driveway being where it is, where it's been for a very long time, is probably, let's try to keep it that way if it's possible. And so, I mean,
yeah,
everything should probably be on the table to reach a consensus here. I just think that on this particular issue, you know, if you all want to have a site walk and get, you know, your own eyes on it and talk together while you're there, I think that's a fine idea. This is probably going to take some back and forth with all the parties, you know, because again, the other thing, you know, the other two things in my memo that I want to kind of, you know, make sure everyone's clear on is, you know, this is not a situation where you touch a stone wall and you've got to get a scenic road permit. It's you touch this much stone wall. Well, you can't see on the screen this much stone wall, and if you touch this much, then you lose. The planning board loses its ability to sort of, you know, issue a permit. It just is a building permit matter at that point. So I think everyone should have an interest in this being a scenic road permit and them touching as much wall as they're touching, because the alternative is you don't get to put any conditions on at all.
Except they still can't cut down trees. Even if we were not part of it, it still requires them to not cut or take down trees. So either way, that's an issue for them.
Yeah. So, you know, there's a logjam here that I think we should all be incentivized to just work out together.
Right.
The other thing that I want, and maybe we don't talk about this now, and maybe this is a little bit of a longer term issue than, you know, between now and the end of September, but you know, the scenic road regulation, I think, could use a little bit more work, because I'm very sympathetic to the position that the historical commission has been put in here, because, they have offered what I think is very valid commentary, that is based in their charge of, maintaining and preserving and stewarding the historic resources of the town. It's just that advice runs at cross purposes to what the planning board is allowed to do under the scenic road, regulations. And so I think, getting the scenic road regulations a little bit more in line with how we all kind of understand them to be in practice, and then also getting into line in terms of what exactly do we need to know from the historical commission, because I don't want to put them in a position where they're kind of going, off the rails of the scenic road bylaw. So we want to make sure that those guardrails are the same for everybody, that we're giving, the Conservation Commission and the Historical Commission clear guidance as to what the planning board is looking for, so that, we're not in a position where they feel, and, it really pains me because I love the Historical Commission, and I don't want to sit there and say, like, guys, you're asking the planning board to do things they can't do. So I think that's another thing that, we should really consider. And then, further down the field, I have to assume, Meredith, that we're going to be talking about Scotts Woods as a local historic district. And I think, the planning board's experience in terms of regulating these scenic roads, local historic districts, you can't, landscaping and landscape is a little bit of a grayer area than the architectural features. But I think, offering that kind of experience of, here's what we've been doing on Harlan Street and Hillside and all these other things. And this is how, local historic regulations and design guidelines can really work hand in glove with the scenic road regulations, I think would be a really fruitful conversation. Because I think, today we've got nothing to say about what that garage looks like. There's no way to get in there and say it should look like this or look like that. It's a garage. If you had design guidelines in the context of a local historic district, then that offers you a lot more opportunity to say, okay, if you're going to punch a hole in the scenic road and put a driveway in, we've got some regulatory authority to say this is what the garage needs to look like in terms of materials, architectural features, et cetera.
But because we've not had those historic districts, the planning board has really been an active role in preserving the character of Milton. And I give Alex Whiteside a tremendous amount of credit, because that has always been his thought and planning, is to preserve the historic character of the town. And so as a chairman of the planning board for so many years, he's actually been able to incorporate and recognize the historic value in a certain location and site. And so I think to say that, that's part of our role. And I think that's where, the historical commission, as we have consulted them, have weighed in, and then we take that and we balance that out with everything. And so, but I think we do have to, the scenic and aesthetic, character of our town is part of the planning board's goal, and what residents would like to see us, to protect the community, protect the town. And by the time we get to historic districts, there might not be many locations like this left. And this is one of our rural, agricultural areas that are, it's changing dramatically over there, but it's still very much intact. And as best we can come to a resolution to help, a situation like this, but balancing it with the preservation, I think is really important.
I would just offer a little, maybe partially contrary view. I think we've actually lost historic character and structures because we have no alternatives in our zoning for many locations. Like we lost the Women's Club, for example, to get a small 3-unit subdivision there. We lose homes to get small subdivisions or 40B developments because we haven't adequately planned for alternatives. So I think, we do have to be mindful that it's a balance that we seek. And, individual homeowners, I think when we look at historic districts, it's going to be important for them to understand how much control over what they can do to their property is going to be put in someone else's hands. And I do think it's going to be a lot of conversation because if they say that a historic commission, might be able to trump their ability to keep their family safe, for example, like in this case, which is what they're proposing. I do think the districts are going to take a lot of conversation. And believe me, I value the historic character and I value the historic structures, but I do think we have to we have to also be very aware that changes do come, and it's better if we anticipate them and help plan for them so that we can preserve things in ways that allow things to change as well.
Okay, so back to this topic. I'm getting a sense that we're interested in doing a site walk. But I guess we should put it, Tim, I'm sorry, you've spent so many hours on this, but do you think it would be good for you to sort of check in with them and explain that we recognize that we gave them permission to do something that they can't do without taking the trees down. So they're probably going to need to come back to us in anticipation of that probability. We'd be happy to have a public site walk so they don't have to deal with 5 of us coming at different times. And that we do very much want to work out some sort of a solution.
Yeah. Yes, I can certainly do that. I've been in touch with these folks. I think they're motivated to get a solution to this. I think it's been they're at the mercy of a lot of kind of turbulent stuff in terms of this has been I've done a couple scenic roads that are usually kind of pro forma type affairs, and this one is just a little bit more complicated for several reasons. So, not their fault, not really anyone's fault. It's just kind of it's a tough spot and a tough situation. So I think I will reach out to them again. I'm out tomorrow, but I'll do this first thing Monday to let them know the planning board's interested in taking a look at the site. We're interested in you coming in and maybe having a little bit of a working session with the planning board and the historical commission just to figure out a solution.
Whoa. I think you wanted really, before we did that, we'd really need to check with town council. I think what we could say is that, we issued the decision and we'd like to take a site walk to, sort of see on the ground where they had staked things off, because our application requirements for these for scenic roads are pretty light on the information that they give us. But I think that we have to wait to see what they start to do, and whether when they finish their design, whether they run into trouble and then have to talk to us. But I wouldn't be offering some sort of consultation, and we don't have any ability to include the historic commission at this point. I mean, they have a decision because we didn't act in time, and so they can go ahead and do what they need to do. So I think we would just say yes. We'd like to talk. We'd like to see what it all is, and we'd like to see that together. In the event they have to come back to us, but I wouldn't go any further than that.
Okay. All right. Let's at least do that, and we'll take it from there. It's kind of like in their court. Okay.
I just don't want us to get sued.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, I think you're right. We don't have to say too much. We can just say that much and let them take the next step. Okay. All right. So we'll move to the next topic, which is the chapter. So now we're going into old business.
Danny, I'm sorry. So are we not taking a site walk then? Or we just?
Tim's gonna offer a site walk. if
Okay,
the
sorry.
applicant.
Yeah,
is
I'll let the pals know that, you know,
Yes, okay, that's,
the planning board wants to come out, if they're around and would consent to, you know, you folks on their property. I mean, if not, again, you know, you can, you know, park your car on the shoulder of Hillside Street, which is very tough because there is no shoulder, no sidewalks on Hillside Street either. I'll always mention that there's no sidewalks on Hillside or Brush Hill Road, where people walk constantly in the street. I'm done. We'll set that up, and we'll get that done hopefully either next week or the week after.
Yeah, we can set that up via email. So if they give us
Yeah,
a couple.
no. We don't have to like schedule it in person the next meeting. We can do that via email. Just get that done. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to do the Milton Village stuff because we're all together and we had dates together.
Excellent. Okay. So, Tim, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little update on the 40B land area calculation.
Yeah, so Denny, Allison, and myself had a call the other day. So if you recall, we had talked towards the end of the last fiscal year about you know, using some planning board budget for a bunch of projects. This is where the Milton Village design guidelines came from, and we also talked about working with an engineering firm to do basically kind of give the planning board and the town a baseline of where we are on the Kathleen, what does GLAM stand for? General Land Area Measure.
Management. Well, it's GLAM.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's not
General
important. It's sort of the statutory minimum in 40B. That's not units. It's land area. So if you've got 1.5% of your developable land area is affordable housing, you get safe harbor under 40B. So I think the interest at the time was it's very easy for us to know where we are on the unit count because it's just counting. It's less clear. I think we have a pretty okay idea of where we are on the land area, but because we have so many 40Bs active right now, if you do the count on the one side of the ledger of units that are on the agenda for the Board of Appeals, we will be very close to 10% if all of these 40Bs are approved in substantially the form that they're in. You know, a little bit less if they get kind of edited down, but just the sheer number of units that is on the docket for the Board of Appeals, you know, puts us, you know, more than 9% at that point. So correspondingly, we get more land area for affordable housing. And so I think I personally actually have come way around on this. I think it's extremely important for us to know where we are on both of those statutory minima, so that if by the time 728 Randolph Ave is done, we want to know, does that put us above 1.5%? And so all of that is to say, we couldn't get it done for the end of the last fiscal year, but we'd like to, you know, Denny, Allison, and I have been talking about, okay, let's put a scope of work together. We've already got a couple of firms that are interested in doing this work. We can kind of back into a procurement document that basically says, and we're talking about an amount of money that basically if we go out and get 3 bids, we're in the clear. We don't have to do an RFP, but we do want to put a scope out there, you know, that's kind of consistent for all the potential bidders. That basically says, you know, we want you to sort of, you know, do the count this according to DHCD specifications. You know, look at the land we've already got. Look at the cemeteries, the Blue Hills, and the parks, and the affordable housing developments. We've got all whatever DHCD wants, and then also, you know, give us the tools and give us sort of, you know, a way to estimate, you know, Blue Hill Ave, Canton Ave, East Milton, Brush Hill Road, Amer Road, Randolph Ave, you know, assuming that those get approved, and you can yank one off or put one back in if you know, depending on what happens at the Board of Appeals. But to give the town an idea of like, once all is said and done and the dust is settled, do we have a case to make a DHCD for that statutory minimum of the 1.5% land area? So we had a conversation this past week. Staff is going to kind of put together a scope of work that we can put out there. Denny's already been in touch with BSC, Horsley Witten, and Weston and Sampson. They've all expressed interest in doing this work. They're all reputable firms. And, just basically put a scope together that we can put out there, take the low bidder and kind of get it done. I think, it's, if this was 6 years ago when we were, stuck in the mud at 4.5% and didn't have anything really promising on the horizon, I would say, but we've got 7 40B projects. There's going to be a significant movement on both the units and the land. And I think it's good for the town to have an idea of both, because you all know me, I'm a go units guy. I want them. But I think what I professionally want more than anything is to get out from under 40B so we can actually do some zoning and really kind of start to advance our goals. So any port in a storm for safe harbor is what I say. So that's where we're at. We're working to put a scope together. We'll bring it to the board for your consideration and figure out, if we want to put that out on the street or not, and then we can go from there. So that's where we're at on that.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also met with Tim and Allison and to discuss putting together a letter that would glean from the various reports and studies that have been done over the year and just sort of mention some of the common themes and just offer to collaborate with the select board on some, problem solving or strategies as far as mainly the top 3 issues that keep coming up every time we try to have a public discussion about any planning in East Milton. We all know this by heart, but the parking enforcement issues, the loading and unloading of the large trucks that serve the businesses. And I'm blanking on the third one, but so anyway, so it's a work in progress. Allison and I are going through the studies and just making sure we're not forgetting anything. And we've already started crafting a letter, so I'll have that at a future meeting. So we already talked about the memory care facility, accessory dwelling unit bylaw.
Can I just add a little bit more color on that?
Yes.
So yeah, that's something that we're also working on. I think there's a lot of action on the planning side and then on sort of the town side in East Milton. The deck project is coming to a head. We've got some planning going on to hopefully activate that deck and potentially make use of some federal funding to do some placemaking and some economic development activity over there. I think the motivating issue here is like Denny said, whether it's the Franklin Street closure or 40B or 440 Granite Ave or any kind of, anything, Judy's discussions with the East Milton Working Group. There's this kind of issue of, the perception that the nuts and bolts are not tight. And, we're going to talk about, bells and whistles, but we're not getting, the basics, right. And whether that's true or not, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and throw any town department under the bus. I think everyone does, a pretty good job. But at the end of the day, there is a perception out there that, where are trucks loading? They're just pulling up onto Church Street. And, that may happen once a month, but if everyone sees it, and that just forms someone's, opinion of what's going on out there. So I think it's more kind of in the spirit of, as we're kind of talking about land use regulation and the town is starting to, look again about, potentially looking at the traffic commission and how the traffic commission is going to start to solve problems related to circulation and parking and loading and things like that. What are the ways the town and the planning board can collaborate on, making sure that we're not working at cross purposes to to each other, and we're really moving towards common solutions to kind of persistent issues. I think I wrote a very long memo about parking in East Milton. I think I stand by it. I think there's a lot of things that we can do to rectify some of those issues that don't involve sacrificing the most precious resource we have, land, for new parking. But it does take a collaborative effort. And I think, one of the things that we learned from the working group is that, people are excited by the possibilities for good things coming to East Milton. I don't think, we get a lot of folks that feel very strongly about individual development projects, but it comes from a place of, we want our neighborhood to function the best way possible. And so, a big part of that is, I'm a big, good government, guy. And so, to be seen, to first be seen, and to second to actually do, out there solving the problems, I think is going to be good. So to bring this full circle, what Allison and Denny are kind of, looking at is just a long history of planning in East Milton that kind of identifies these issues, and what type of actions have been taken so far, and what type of actions kind of need to be taken. Voting.
I can say actually, there's not been a lot of action. There's a lot of studies. There's a ton of studies.
A lot of studies.
And so I think a big part of it becomes like, okay, how can and Judy's report talks about this a lot. How can land use regulations start to, move the needle on incentivizing, those types of things, whether it's public realm improvements or, actually establishing a loading zone, and actually, being able to put regulations in place that are enforceable. If you've got a loading zone that's open, in the middle of the day when everyone's trying to go to Dunkies and Starbucks and pop into, Mr. Chan's, odds are that's not going to function as a loading zone. So, how do you sort of craft these regulations where it's actually workable and enforceable, usable, as opposed to just kind of, doing something that just doesn't work. And so this all. Well, sorry, Cheryl.
I just wanted to add, I think it's important to engage the business community in the discussion. I shared a couple of years ago when I had gone and spent a little time in Munich and observed that they had this in their historic center. They were managing their service in a really, what I seem to think was very efficient way. Like they had these hours in the morning before the stores open, where it was just, if you were out early, you were going to see all kinds of truck and service activities. But then they were all gone by, let's say, 10 o'clock. And it was devoted to pedestrians and public, very nice public uses. And maybe it's Germany, so they're organized and they're clean and everything, right? But it was lovely, right? It was really lovely. And you could see where pedestrian and lively environment, they could manage their service. They can manage the services. They can manage the trash. They can manage the deliveries. But I think and I don't know if it's all regulatory, but it seems to me that the business community really has to be on board so that they, like when my office co-owned a building on A Street in Fort Point, the co-owners were restaurateurs, and part of the liquor license approval there was working with the neighbors on when deliveries were going to happen and when trash was going to be picked up and how to manage rodent control. And the agreement that was come to was that the trash pickup would be far more regular than it is typically, and that they would turn away any trucks that came in hours that weren't approved. And it worked. They enforced it. They enforced what was agreed to with the neighbors, and it worked. So I guess my suggestion again, kind of back to this is, there were times when I remember, parking as service zone designations made, and yet they weren't enforced, right? So, they're meaningless if they're not enforced, right? And it takes, and they shouldn't have to be enforced. The business community, that's getting the permits should be enforcing it themselves, self-enforcing it. And so it's this cooperative nature that needs to happen. And it's for the benefit of all, right? Because if things can function well, then the businesses will do better, right? they'll do better business. They'll have happier customers, happier neighbors, and it'll be kumbaya. But I think we can learn from what other communities have done. Is my point, you know. And some of these European cities, you know, really have far more restrictions. I mean, constraints, if you will, because they're so much older, so narrower, you know, how you can get things in and out. And some of it is you have to come in with smaller vehicles, smaller trucks. Like Amsterdam was a great example. I was reading an article how they manage it. They're doing more on barges. Like, not that we can do that. And small barges, you know, but they're like getting the heads
Maybe in the
together.
village.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You know, but they're getting their heads together to come up and manage it so it doesn't destroy their city, right? And so anyway,
Yeah, that's what we
I think that's what we're getting at, honestly, is you know, let's kind of form a closer collaboration with the town. Yeah, and I say town, I just mean sort of the folks that are under the select board jurisdiction as opposed to the planning board. You know, so that, you know, we're all kind of working together and are aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I'm sure they're hearing the same things at all the public hearings that we're hearing, but it's just kind of just sort of bringing them up to speed that we want to have these discussions, and it will be easier to have these discussions without, you know, if we could address some of these enforcement issues, that will free us up to do bigger and better things. So, so just a collaborative goal there. All right. So for fall and winter town meeting articles, it's already 9:30. But I was interested to hear from Kathleen if she would like to give us an update on the accessory dwelling unit bylaw.
Sure. I revised it to sort of address some of the, there's a Cape Cod model that's been adopted in 15 of the Cape Cod cities and towns have adopted a model bylaw. So I took a look at that, and then, as I said, I don't know how many different cities and towns had it on spring warrant articles last spring. But I wanted to consider putting in a cap that Denny had suggested at some point in the game, that we would only allow, let's say, 10 a year, something like that. I wondered what people's thoughts were on that particular issue.
So can we make that part of it a pilot, so we don't necessarily have to go back and change the zoning in a few?
No, I would put language in there that would say that, you know, we could release the cap. It's
okay. That's yeah. My concern was not to have to go back.
No, it wouldn't have to go back to zoning. That'd be just a planning board hearing to release it.
Well, I very much appreciate that you took a consideration of mine into your thinking. So
it's kind of snarky, but okay.
Well, I wasn't saying it. I wasn't intended to be snarky. It was genuine appreciation. 10 a year would mean 110 years, which would mean we'd still have to come up with 10 affordable, which I know sounds like not very much 10 affordable, but we have been absolutely terrible at coming up with even 2 affordable for like Walcott Woods or Pulte or whatever. It's really hard for us to come up with affordable. And you had been saying, oh, there'd only be 3 a year or something. So I'm wondering if there's any flexibility on that cap, maybe 3 a year or something.
I don't think it's worth the effort of putting in all the work to just say that we're going to do 3 a year. And it has been part of the master plan and actually I took a look, there was an accessory dwelling unit bylaw that was actually proposed over 10 years ago. This is something that we've been looking at for quite some time and still haven't done anything. And so I think if you want to address affordability, there, as I have mentioned sometimes, is that I do represent the town of Lincoln's Affordable Housing Trust. They have a program, as does Carlisle, for accessory dwelling units that are affordable, and they are approved by DHCD. So if that's something that people want to think about in the future, we can certainly consider that. It's it's not been a very popular idea because mostly these units are used for family members. And as you know, there's fair housing requirements that say that if you're going to rent this out, you have to, make it open to anybody else. So the affordability situation is something that, hasn't been a big taker yet so far. In Lincoln, we're rolling out a provision that provides a tax break because you've got an affordable unit. We'll see how many applicants we have for that once that gets done. But I think 10 is reasonable, and as a sort of a pilot program. I don't think that the floodgates are opening and that it's going to really affect our SHI in any serious way. I also think you have to remember that SHI is limited to units that are affordable for 80% of area median income. And we have a real gap in this town for seniors, for people that make more than 80%, for the middle class, for, as I said, for people aging out. And we're not addressing that either. We have housing for affordables and we have housing for rich people, and we don't have anything in the middle. And so this is an opportunity to provide housing for people that not necessarily everything needs to be on the SHI. We have needs for people that make 100 or 120% of area median income that aren't being addressed. So as I said, this provides an opportunity for a housing stock that isn't currently available. And it also will provide a provision in there I've put in to say that if you've got an illegal accessory units, that you could actually make it legal, which would be a real safety benefit for everybody, an amnesty program that people could apply for.
So I would
So
say
I'll send that
that
along for the next meeting.
I would say, just to Kathleen's point, if I may, the housing production plan talks about both SHI units, sort of the capital A affordable units, but also the lowercase a affordable units are the ones that Kathleen's talking about that don't qualify for the SHI. And they're, so the accessory dwelling is definitely something the housing committee has talked a lot about, in my understanding, as being something to address the lowercase a. And the other thing that the committee, and I think again in the housing production plan, it's in the housing production plan, and the committee has talked about is inclusionary zoning. And, like in some places, I know Boston, a lot of people don't like to hear Boston as an example compared to Milton, but Boston does do some things well. They have inclusionary zoning. And so if you do commercial development, for example, you're required to make contributions into certain funds, and Affordable Housing Fund is one of them. So it's one of the mitigation measures. So it could be something where if the inclusionary zoning were adopted, it could help address the Denny's concern about adding to the denominator, I guess it is, right, of the for the ratio. But I don't think we should only think about SHI units. I think thinking about the broader need is important too. And I've been contacted and I've been involved in several ADUs for families here in Milton, where in two cases they were widows and a family member and their young family was going to move into the main house, and the widow was moving into the ADU. And another case, it's a couple, but they want to age in place, and they want everything on one level. And there's much of our housing stock is not on one level. You have to go up 6 or 7 steps to get to a porch and then go in. There's usually not a full bath on the first floor. If you've ever dealt with an elderly parent where they can't navigate the stairs up to the full bath, there's lots of challenges with aging in place in the older housing stock.
Yeah. Okay. So
this is what addresses some of these things. Okay. So that's what this addresses.
All right. So Kathleen, did you want to present that to us at the next meeting?
Yes, I'll send the draft to Tim to post for the next meeting.
Okay. All right.
And I don't want to sound like the type of SHI 40B cynic that I kind of dislike, but the more units you get on your inventory, the more land you get on your land inventory, and that denominator is much tougher to change than the unit denominator. So I think, again, you don't cross any of those lines without building affordable housing. And, once you get to the one, you're there for pretty good. So I think the housing production plan, and I think the general kind of stance towards housing the town needs to take is that you can make up for things, I say this all the time. There's no inclusionary requirement for the single family house that comes out of an A&R that the planning board is obligated to approve. So we have to take that into account as well. So when we talk about other kind of zoning, this is why when we talk about Milton Village, we're talking about 12% as opposed to 10%. That's why I think as we sort of look at town-owned land, we're talking about greater percentages of affordability to kind of, you've got regular single family houses going up that are inching your denominator up. You've got to get those affordable units somewhere else. So, it's a comprehensive and a holistic strategy where I think, the experience that Kathleen has described in the past is that, folks don't necessarily want to have a deed restricted affordable ADU. So it just isn't something that gets taken advantage of. So it's like, don't throw the ADU out. Let's figure out where we get those affordable units somewhere else. And so that's
that's the thing. We have to be thinking about where we're going to get those affordable units because we want to get out from under 40B. So we have to think of how we want to do this. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So.
Well, we can't make up for 30 years of never doing affordable housing in a nanosecond, but.
Well,
tell that to the 40B developers.
I was going to say. Sounds like the Tamposies. They're working on it.
Yeah, the Tamposies are working hard on it. Okay. So the earth removal deposit of fill bylaw, Tim, did you want to we're just plugging away here.
Plugging away, the working group, the planning board's working group, which consists of Denny, Cheryl, and myself, the building commissioner and the town engineer, have been working on a sort of a little bit more of a comprehensive update to the earth removal bylaw. It's a tricky issue. It really is. I think we're really making good progress, but it's also, how do you achieve the goals that you want? And I think what we're discovering is, you peel back layers and it's like, wait, we want to do this. And so how do we do it? And we want to do this, how do we do it? And I think, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we want to keep the earth removal and deposit of fill bylaw as circumscribed to that particular issue of bringing dirt on and taking dirt off. But I think our conversations have revealed that there's a lot more interest in low impact development, for instance, which is kind of the general theme, I think, of Cheryl's past few years on the on the planning board is, working with the land and really sort of designing sites that have as little impact on the topography and ecology of these sites as possible, and really just sort of reaps benefits downstream, literally and figuratively, when it comes to stormwater and just aesthetics and whatever. And so how are other towns kind of achieving these? And so, we're talking about potentially coming up with low impact design guidelines or a policy that the planning board can adopt. And then kind of, more general questions about tree protection. There are tree protection provisions that have been added to cut and fill. Do those need to go in their own set of policies, a bylaw, for instance, or something else that can be adopted? But, to sort of keep the dirt where the dirt is and maybe talk a little bit more detail about trees kind of elsewhere. So that's all. I think we're all working very hard. It's
okay.
funny to me.
Thank you for that update.
I didn't go to planning. I didn't go to planning school to talk about piles of dirt, but I enjoy it quite a bit. It's actually fascinating stuff.
Oh, we do too. Okay, so are there other potential zoning articles, Tim, like a cell tower or something?
Yeah, so the select board has been interested. I forget if it was last year. So the federal government has issued guidance that basically, so we're talking about 5G, which is when you hear small cell tower, Wi-Fi or cell structures, that's what they're talking about. Your typical 4G cell tower is at the, in the swamp in Quincy or wherever else you have a cell phone tower. 5G it necessitates many more smaller antennas. You get better coverage, better service, faster service, but the expense is smaller towers. The federal government recently, maybe it was probably more than a year ago, issued a rule that basically says that you can't zone away small cell towers. So you can imagine a world in which, a town says, we don't want any of these in our town because they're ugly and we don't want them. And then all of a sudden you lose the network effect of 5G, and now all of your citizens and potentially other citizens of other towns don't get the benefits of 5G. So the rule is you've got to allow these things. It's like a Dover Amendment sort of thing where like you've got to allow these uses. However, you do have the ability to regulate design and because the way that you can do these things is the Wild Wild West, where every cell company puts their box on a telephone pole and it looks like something out of Mad Max. Or you can regulate design and put in reasonable restrictions, and then Verizon comes in and they've got to do things in a nice way. And so the poles look different from your normal telephone or light pole. They don't look bad. And so all of this is to say that the select board has been interested in, similar to our wireless facility zoning that we have for cell towers, coming up with some zoning. We have a policy about it that was adopted by the select board, just about certain things that are under their jurisdiction. But I think, before we start to see a wave of these things coming in, and I think there already is one. If you look on the corner of where kind of Central Ave and Brook Road meet, you can see one of these things. They're it's like if you put like a big barrel on the top of a pole, and then there's a big wider base. Once you see these things, you'll recognize them all over the place. But before we start getting a wave of them, they wanted to sort of think about putting in some regulations. All that being said, I haven't gotten a lot of information about sort of a timeline for that. I think they want to do it, but I think we're waiting on some town council. So kind of waiting to hear from them, although I can definitely kind of poke on that issue to see if there's any kind of part of that we can pick up from either a research or a drafting perspective.
But are they going to end up having to have that discussion as part of, aren't they looking at doing our own, Wi-Fi network or something?
So that is the municipal broadband, which is different from the cell service. So the broadband is fiber under the ground, and that plugs into your house. And then 5G is cell service essentially.
Oh, okay.
It'd be awesome to have both, but Verizon is trying to work on their network, and T-Mobile is trying to work on their network. It's just like cell. They've got to come in and they lease space on these poles. So I'll make a note to kind of ask if they need us to pick up the ball on that anyway, because it's not, it's their priority. I mean, I think it's a good priority for the town to want to do it, but they may want a hand. So let me check in on that.
Okay, so that might be winter, or it might go to spring.
I'll definitely check in. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so then the rules and regulations.
Jenny, I'm sorry, just before you go to that,
yes.
There was this idea or this issue that came up with the Attorney General, Milton Village, on the revolving funds.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
I don't know if you have anything to report on that, Tim.
Yeah, I did. I talked to town council a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately, the way that this has kind of manifested itself is, and Cheryl and I had a conversation with town council a month and a half maybe ago, or 2 months when this first came up. The way it manifests itself is whenever you pass zoning, you've got to submit it to the Attorney General's Office of Municipal Services or Affairs or Municipal, I forget what the name. They've got to give it the stamp and make sure that you're not doing anything that flies in the face of the Constitution. And so, you get those back, and so they put their stamp on, Milton Village overlay zoning is good. The revolving funds are not good. We didn't get a really detailed kind of tick-tock of what the issues were. They really just said, we think this is going to be a problem. Can we get an extension? Because they have to make a decision within a certain amount of time, just like the planning board does. They requested an extension to kind of further consider it. So we really are kind of waiting on the AG to tell us precisely what the issue is. Because it's tough to kind of work out a solution without knowing what the problem is. that being said, I think it's basically the revolving funds that sort of were tied to some of the incentives that were in the zoning, involved contributions for public realm improvements, and you did historic preservation, you got this. And so we set up revolving funds for those to receive those funds if developers wanted to take advantage of them. The concept of monetary exactions for zoning incentives is a tale as old as time. Everyone and their grandmother's best friend does it. So there's a way to do it. It just may not be sort of the revolving fund kind of mechanism. So I'm pretty confident we can figure something out that's in the spirit of what we wanted to do. It's just kind of what is the legal mechanism that we need to set up to do it. So all of that's a long way of saying it's a little bit of a wait and see game. So once we hear back from the AG, we'll be able to take some better action.
Yeah, it may be a legal and accounting issue. But I'd just like to keep it on the list, Denny, just because as soon as we do hear back, I do think we want to address it in case there's projects that come forward, we have a place to put the money.
Right, we want to keep that on the list. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Well, it was good that we had this meeting to kind of talk through all these issues, because it's going to pick up again in the fall. So I'm glad we had a chance to talk through these issues. Okay, so the last item is really about our rules and regulations. We know we want to put the previously approved tree protection regulations. We are aiming to do a notice for our last meeting, which is September 22nd now, because we haven't heard otherwise from Rich. While we are having that public hearing, have Kathleen and Cheryl had a chance to look at rules and regulations? We're looking for something that would be low-hanging fruit that we would all have consensus on. I went through and I was comfortable doing waivers on almost everything I saw. So I would need some convincing, but I'm open.
Yeah, I just wanted I think what Tim mentioned earlier about this low impact design would definitely impact the rules and regs. And and in part, it has to do with the width of roadways, the composition of the materials in the roadways, because these things they have environmental impact, right? So, like our regs don't distinguish between a small road that has 1 or 2 lots versus a road like Blue Hill Ave. Well, that's a state road, but you know what I mean. So,
so we currently get there by doing waivers, but you wanted to kind of flush it out possibly, like
because we end up in a position of like, is 18 feet adequate for one location? And no, but 20 feet's adequate for somewhere else, or it's like, no, we should decide if it's and the highway folks have already done this. I mean, it's already been done at the state level. There's model regulations for this stuff. We just haven't updated ours.
We haven't updated it in a century, and it's just, it's just sad.
And so I would like to say on those components of it that we tie it to this low impact development. So,
so perhaps after we do the cut and fill bylaw, we could break into a working group to kind of study
this is something that's interested me for years now on the board, and I did a bunch of research and stashed stuff away for when we could get to it, because it does involve a town engineer as well, because there are engineering issues with it. We have a town engineer, in our group, Denny, and she's interested, from what I understand, in this topic. So I'm hopeful that she'll have the time to, to put into it along with Tim, looking at these other model, what other towns are doing. So, every time we build a wide road with curb and stormwater structure, that water has to go somewhere. Is it being cleaned? Where it ends up? It ends up in the Neponset River and the harbor and the, so these are really important things.
Yeah, we're not doing anything about recharging. We don't.
Yeah, so I mean, we could do rain gardens to pick up some of it. It doesn't all have to go into the pipe system, but it's not purely planning, it's engineering. So it is a team effort. But I hope the board will be supportive, the full board will be supportive of this and really try and work with the engineering department, DPW, to make it happen now. It's becoming more and more important. We're getting these rain events that are, a lot of rain in a short period of time.
Okay.
So that's what I see.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to go back yet and look at other things.
No, that's great. That's
but those
fine.
things come out at me, jump out
No,
at me
I
all
think
the
you
time.
had telegraphed that, I think you had telegraphed that you thought that it would be good to do a working group and to bring in an engineer, and we might want to bring in a fire department for some questions and that. So that's like a longer term process. We were just, Tim, I think we should go ahead, do the notice for the public notice for the rules and regulation in relation to the tree bylaw for the last meeting in September. And this rules and regulation discussion we'll have in greater depth later.
Yeah,
down the road.
and I've got to be 100% honest. I feel like the last time that you guys did some amendments, it might have been 2018 or 2019. It was a little bit before my time. I think you did do a couple of the really kind of egregious ones. I think linen is
Well, yeah, we did the obvious
go-to.
ones like linen plans and clay pipes, I think.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple more that are like they're still low-ish hanging, but probably need a little bit more work. There's a couple more pipe things that I think we want to take care of. I think the design speed of the roads, we should absolutely just lower that. I don't think we need to put too much thought into it, but like you want to put a little bit of thought into it. And then I think there are things, to Cheryl's point, which probably require a little bit more collaboration and thought. So I thought I was going to go through these and find a couple like really like egregious things, like one of those like funny, like here's a law that's on the books from 1,000 years ago. But actually there's most of the stuff that's in here probably needs a little bit more thought. And so I haven't put that thought into it just yet. So Jenny, I'm kind of on board. Let's not have the tree thing hang over us. But I will give a little bit of a closer look to some of the materials that Lauren put together in terms of the kind of common waivers in recent history, and maybe give a little bit of an opinion about what I think. And it's something for the board to sink its teeth into and get a conversation started, so we can develop a long-term strategy of maybe like within the next year, let's kind of clean this up. The last thing I'll say, and Denny, I know I can tell you're trying to get this done, and I'm right there with you. I did get, just at the end of the day, I forget if it was Weston or Wellesley, one of the W's, is looking for a consultant to kind of do similar thing to what we're talking about. And I just want to take a look at their RFQ and kind of like, not that we necessarily need to bring someone on, I don't think we should at this point, but just to kind of see what other people are doing and what they're looking at and how they're approaching it.
Interesting. Okay, wonderful. Well, I think we hit everything on the agenda. We can move to approve the meeting minutes at our next agenda, just because Rich is in here and it'd be nice to let him do that. So unless anyone has anything they would like to add, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Other than have a nice weekend, everybody.
Yes, why, thank you. And you too.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor? Cheryl?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
And Meredith.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
All right, thanks,
Night.
everybody.
Okay, we'll see you later. Bye, Tim. Bye, Julia.